Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is move of What If Deku became Katsuki's greatest rival? All credits for this video go to the original author, GatGrace. So, please support the real author by checking out the link in the description for more details. If you want more videos like this, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get into the fanfic. Oi! Don't just stand there loitering. What are you waiting for? It's getting on my nerves. You have a weird butt look in your eye. Hurry up and do it or I'll do it for you. Bakugo growled. Gat had already tried. The rip in her hero uniform was small. Aizawa had told her to get the sewing kit from Midnight's room, but it was on the top shelf. Gat chewed on her lip and looked back at the sewing kit. I can't. Katsuki's crimson eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening as he stared at her. The way she bit her lip like that, looking at him with those eyes, it set him off. Or at least, that's what he told himself as heat crawled up the back of his neck. The hell is that supposed to mean? He stepped closer, closing the distance between them with that aggressive confidence he carried everywhere. His voice dropped lower, rougher, though he didn't seem to realize it. You think I'm just gonna do whatever you want because you stand there looking all like that? He reached past her, his arm brushing against hers as he grabbed whatever it was she'd been hesitating over, a jar on the top shelf, stuck tight with a lid that wouldn't budge. His palm crackled with the faintest pop of his quirk as he wrenched it open with zero effort, then shoved it back into her hands. Done. You're welcome. He didn't step back though. He was still standing way too close, glaring down at her like he was daring her to say something about it. A small bead of sweat glistened on his collarbone where his black tank top hung loose. Next time, just ask instead of standing around like a lost puppy. It's pathetic. His ears were red. He absolutely did not acknowledge that fact. He was always so mean. And it was fine being rude, but it was crossing a line to call names. Gat's voice was stern. Me? Pathetic? My eyes sharp. Don't say it again, Katsuki. Something flickered behind those crimson eyes. Surprise, maybe, or something more dangerous. His pupils sharpened like a predator catching an unexpected movement. Nobody talked back to him like that. Nobody said his name like that, all sharp and low, like a blade pressed against skin. Ha! He questioned her. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a snarl. He leaned in closer, one hand slamming against the shelf behind her head, caging her in. The wood groaned under the force. Small sparks popped and fizzled from his palm, the scent of caramel and smoke curling between them. You got some nerve, telling me what to do. His face was inches from hers now, close enough that she could see the way his jaw clenched, the way a muscle in his neck jumped. His breath was warm against her glass sandblasted skin. Those sharp red eyes dragged over her face, her eyes, her mouth, back up again, like he was trying to figure out a puzzle that was genuinely pissing him off. Say that again, he growled, voice dropping into something low and rough, almost gravelly. It wasn't a threat. Or maybe it was. With Katsuki, the line between aggression and something else entirely had always been razor thin. Look me in the eye and say that again. I dare you. His heartbeat was hammering against his ribs. He could feel it in his throat. And he hated that she was the reason. Gat really doesn't care what he says, she shrugged and got back on her way to the office. Knowing she could overpower him if she wanted. Katsuki stood there, arms still pressed against the shelf, watching her just walk away. She shrugged. She actually shrugged at him, damn it, and turned her back like he was nothing. Like he wasn't worth the effort. His hand dropped from the shelf, fingers curling into a fist so tight his knuckles went white. Small explosions crackled and popped in his palms, leaving thin wisps of smoke trailing from his clenched hands. Oi! His voice was sharp, cutting through the hallway like a crack of thunder. She didn't stop. His eye twitched. Don't you walk away from me when I'm talking to you. He was moving before he could stop himself, boots hitting the floor hard as he caught up to her in a few long strides. He didn't grab her. Some stubborn part of him refused to give her the satisfaction of knowing she'd gotten under his skin that badly, but he fell into step right beside her, matching her pace with an irritated scowl carved deep into his face. "The hell is your problem?" he snapped, shoving his hands into his pockets because he didn't trust them not to spark again. He glanced sideways at her, and what bothered him most wasn't the dismissal. It was the confidence. The way she carried herself, like she knew something he didn't. Like she could take him. "You think you're hot shit, don't you? Walking around like you own the DM in place." He was still walking with her. He hadn't turned around. He didn't even know why. Gat crinkled her nose at him and turned into the teacher's office for my appointment. He wasn't gonna follow her there. Katsuki stopped dead in his tracks at the threshold of the teacher's office, like he'd hit an invisible wall. His boots scuffed against the floor as he caught himself mid-stride, one hand still shoved in his pocket while the other hovered at his side, sparking faintly. She crinkled her nose at him. Like he was annoying. Like he was a bug. He stood in the doorway for a beat too long, glaring at the back of her head as she disappeared inside. His teeth ground together so hard his jaw ached. A few teachers glanced up from their desks. Aizawa's tired eyes slid toward him with a look that said don't even think about it, and Katsuki's hand gripped the doorframe hard enough to leave dents. He didn't follow her in. Not because he couldn't. Because it wasn't worth it. That's what he told himself as he finally peeled his fingers off the frame and turned on his heel, stalking back down the hallway with murder radiating off him in waves. A group of first years saw him coming and practically plastered themselves against the wall to let him. "Whatever," he muttered under his breath, but his mind was already doing the thing he hated, replaying the way she'd looked at him. The shrug. The sharp eyes. The way she said his name. He kicked open the stairwell door with way more force than necessary, the bang echoing through the corridor. He'd be waiting when she came out. Not because he cared. Obviously. He just had unfinished business. That was all. Katsuki had planted himself at his desk in the classroom like a bomb waiting to go off. His chair was tilted back on two legs, arms crossed over his chest, jaw set so hard it could cut glass. He was staring at the blackboard like it had personally wronged him, but he wasn't seeing a single thing written on it. Then she walked in. She didn't look at him. She sat in the first row. Far right. She was pale because of her quirk. He wasn't sure he knew what her quirk was. Something about glass. Her fingers stayed clear but visible most of the time. Her hair was an iridescent blue. Her eyeglassy, they usually showed a blue the same color of her hair or a blue purple, or when the sun set they were blue-yellow. Her skin is like sandblasted glass. When the sun caught her, she cast rainbows off into the room, and right now she sat in the class and smiled to herself. Gat got out her supplies. Wondering if Katsuki knew nitroglycerin smells sweet. She breathed in the memory of his scent opening to the page in the textbook. His eyes snapped to her immediately. He couldn't help it, and he despised that, tracking her as she settled into her seat. And then she smiled. Not at him. Not at anyone. Just to herself, this quiet little private thing, like she had a secret tucked behind her lips. His chair legs hit the floor with a sharp clack. "The hell are you smiling about?" he barked from across the room, loud enough that a few heads turned. Kirishima, sitting nearby, gave him a look that screamed, "Dude, chill," but Katsuki ignored it entirely. His palms were sweating, which meant they were producing more nitroglycerin than usual, that sickeningly sweet scent drifting through the air around him without his permission. He watched her open her textbook all calm and collected, completely unbothered, and something about that made his chest tight in a way that had nothing to do with anger. He yanked his own textbook open with enough force to nearly rip the cover off, burying his face in it. He could still see her smiling in his peripheral vision. It was going to be a long class. Gat smirks. She knew she was bothering him. Which was fair. He was bothering her, to be honest. He gave her fragile butterflies in her stomach which he often dissolved by being mean. Katsuki caught the smirk. Of course he did. He caught every single thing she did because apparently his brain had decided that monitoring her every micro-expression was more important than whatever the hell present Mike was screaming about at the front of the room. Eyes forward, Bakugo. Aizawa droned from his sleeping bag in the corner, not even opening his eyes, like he had some sixth sense for when Katsuki was about to cause a problem. Katsuki's head snapped forward, a vein pulsing in his temple. His pencil creaked dangerously in his grip as he pretended to take notes, but the only thing on his paper was a series of aggressive, illegible scratches that could have been mistaken for a seismograph reading. The sweet smell of nitroglycerin was getting worse. Ciro 2 rose over, wrinkled his nose and whispered something to Kaminari, who snickered. Katsuki shot them both a look that could melt steel. The worst part, the absolute worst part, was that he knew exactly what he was doing wrong. He was giving her the reaction. Every snap, every glare, every time he opened his loud mouth, he was handing her ammunition on a silver platter. He knew it the same way he knew combat strategy, instinctively, clearly, infuriatingly. And yet he couldn't stop. He tore a corner off his notebook paper, scrawled something on it in his sharp, surprisingly neat handwriting, and flicked it onto her desk as he walked past to sharpen his pencil. Is what he told himself in his own mind. Stop looking so smug or I'll blast that smile off your face. Even his threats were starting to sound like something else entirely. Gat's eyes flicked to the paper. I didn't read it or touch it. Just let it lay there. It probably said something violent and dumb. This wasn't third grade anymore, Katsuki. You can't hit girls because you like them, I thought, propping up my chin on my hand. Katsuki watched from the pencil sharpener, grinding the same pencil down to a nub he'd never actually use, as the note sat untouched on her desk. She didn't even glance at it. Just propped her chin on her hand like she was posing for a diamond painting, all relaxed and pretty and completely, utterly indifferent to his existence. The pencil snapped in his hand. Sheet, he hissed under his breath, dropping the broken halves into the trash with more aggression than the action warranted. He stalked back to his seat, and his eyes betrayed him again, dragging across her on the way. The note was still sitting there, untouched, like a tiny white flag of surrender that she'd somehow turned into his defeat. His ears burned. He dropped into his chair hard enough to make Kirishima flinch, and for the remaining 20 minutes of class, Katsuki Bakugo did something he almost never did. He went completely silent. No outbursts. No snapping. No explosions. Just rigid posture, clenched jaw, and a storm brewing behind those red eyes as he stared holes into his destroyed notebook page. Because she was right, and some deep, buried part of him knew it. Every insult, every threat, every time he got in her space and dared her to push back, it was making him look like an idiot. The bell rang. Katsuki didn't move. He sat there, watching her pack up through his peripheral vision, and his throat worked around something he'd never say. This is so effing stupid. Katsuki finally stood up, snatching his bag off the back of his chair with enough force to send the chair scraping backwards across the floor. He noticed the note still sitting on her desk, untouched, unread, completely ignored, and something hot and sharp twisted behind his ribs. He grabbed it on his way past, crumpling it in his fist and incinerating it with a quiet pop of his palm. The ashes dusted the floor like black snow. He could hear her down the hall, bouncing with excitement, laughing with her friends at the lockers, all light and easy, like the last hour hadn't happened. Like he hadn't happened. Katsuki shoved through the classroom door and turned the opposite direction, because he was absolutely not going to walk past her. He wasn't going to give her the chance to not look at him again. That was worse than any fight he'd ever lost. Bakugo, you good? Kirishima jogged up beside him, that annoyingly earnest grin on his face. You were kinda quiet back there. That's like a red flag coming from you, man. Shut up, shitty hair. I'm fine. Bakugo shoved his hands in his pockets harder. The words came out flatter than usual, missing their typical bite. Kirishima noticed. Of course Kirishima noticed. The idiot was perceptive when it mattered most. Is this about? Kirishima started. I said shut up. Bakugo's ears started to turn red. Katsuki rounded the corner toward the stairwell and caught the faintest echo of her laugh drifting down the corridor behind him. His step faltered for just half a second before he kept walking, jaw tight, hands smoking in his pockets, burning holes through the fabric. Gat spoke quietly to the other girls. Do you really think he has a crush? Is it that obvious? Mina Ashido practically vibrated out of her skin, slamming her locker shut with a metallic bang that echoed down the hall. Girl, are you kidding me right now? She grabbed Gat by the shoulders, her golden eyes wide with disbelief. He broke a pencil watching you. A whole pencil. Snapped it like a twig because you didn't read his little love note. It wasn't a love note, Tsuyu said flatly, finger pressed to her chin in thought. Knowing Bakugo, it probably said something about blasting your face off. But yes, that's basically the same thing coming from him, rib bit. Jairu leaned against the lockers, one earphone jack twirling lazily as she smirked. He also passed by the pencil sharpeners 6 times last week during English. You sit next to the pencil sharpener. She held up 6 fingers for emphasis. 6. The boy doesn't even use pencils, Gat. He writes in pen. Mina was nodding so fast her pink curls bounced. And don't even get me started on the hallway thing. Hagakure told me he was standing outside the teacher's office waiting for you like a guard dog. Just standing there. Fuming. For 12 minutes. 12 minutes is a long time to stand somewhere you have no reason to be, Momo added delicately from behind her open locker door, though the knowing smile on her face was anything but subtle. Mina squeezed Gat's shoulders harder, her grin absolutely feral. The boy is down bad. Catastrophically. The whole class knows. The only person who doesn't know is him. Gat smiled. I do think there is probably someone I would like if I could get past his walls of anger and murder. She spun a curl of blue hair around her finger. The girls collectively lost their minds. Mina let out a shriek so high-pitched that Koda's bird 2 hallways over probably heard it. She clamped her hands over her own mouth, eyes enormous, bouncing on her toes like she was physically incapable of containing the energy inside her body. I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. Mina grabbed Jairu's arm so hard the other girl winced. She likes him back. Code red. Code red. Keep your voice down, Jairu hissed, yanking her arm free and glancing nervously down the corridor. His hearing isn't as good as mine, but the guy's perceptive as hell. If he catches even a whiff of this conversation, we're all dead. Literally. Explosions. Funeral. Tsuyu tilted her head thoughtfully. The walls of anger and murder are kind of the whole package with Bakugo though, rib bit. You'd have to be patient. He doesn't know how to be soft. He barely knows how to be civil. Momo closed her locker gently, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with an almost maternal look of concern. He has changed though. Slowly. He's not the same person he was first year. I think underneath all that aggression he's just terrified of vulnerability. He doesn't know what to do with feelings that he can't fight or explode. Mina's feral grin softened into something warmer. She put her arm around Gat's shoulder and leaned in conspiratorially. So here's what you do. You keep doing exactly what you're doing, not chasing him, not flinching, not giving him the reaction he expects. Make him come to you. Because trust me. She pointed down the hallway where faint wisps of smoke still lingered in the air near the stairwell. He's already halfway there. He just doesn't know it yet. Gat grinned at Mina. I really doubt it. I think the violence is deep. I really would love to see him be vulnerable, but I really doubt he is capable. Gat rolled her eyes and shut the locker. From around the corner of the stairwell, Bakugo stood frozen. He'd come back. He'd told himself it was because he forgot something in the classroom, a lie so transparent even he couldn't sell it to himself, and he'd been rounding the corner when he heard his name. His feet had stopped moving before his brain caught up, and then he just stayed there, listening, like a DMN idiot pressed against the wall of a hallway eavesdropping on a group of girls like some pathetic extra in a bad drama. I really doubt he is capable. The words hit him somewhere deep and soft, a place he didn't let anyone access, a place he barely acknowledged existed. His hand was flat against the wall, and he realized distantly that he wasn't sparking, wasn't smoking, wasn't doing any of the things his body usually did when emotions ran hot. He was just so. The worst part was that she wasn't wrong. And he knew it. He'd spent years building those walls so high and so thick that even he couldn't see over them anymore. Violence was easy. Anger was easy. It was armor he never had to take off because nobody ever made him want to. Until now. And that was the most terrifying thing Katsuki Bakugo had ever faced. Worse than All for One, worse than any villain, worse than every failure combined. Because you can't fight this. You can't blast your way through it or win by being stronger. He peeled himself off the wall silently, turned, and walked away. No explosions. No stomping. Just quiet footsteps disappearing down the stairwell. That night, Katsuki lay in his dorm room staring at the ceiling, arms behind his head, completely still. Vulnerable. Teach. He didn't sleep. Gat got up to run. She washed her face and pulled back her hair. It was warm out. She picked a tank and leggings. Just a quick 5 miles. The weather was appealing. I thought about doing another 5 miles just to feel the breeze on the last bend. The gravel crunch on another path in the woods. There were many hiking trails in the trees, many of the students and teachers using them for physical endurance training. Gat stood for a moment to decide if she would go back to the dorms or around the trail one more time, the feet on the other trail stopping abruptly. Gat looked up. It was Katsuki Bakugo. Still 15 yards down the path. He looked different, like uniform, no gauntlets, no snarling mask of aggression to hide behind. Just a black tank top dark with sweat, athletic shorts, and running shoes caked in trail dust. His hair was damp, sticking to his forehead in unruly blonde spikes, and his chest was heaving. He'd been running hard, probably harder than her, because Katsuki Bakugo didn't know how to do anything at less than maximum intensity. His skin glistened in the early morning light, and without the constant furrow of his brow and the clenched jaw, he looked almost human. For a long, suspended moment, neither of them moved. 15 yards of gravel and morning air stretched between them like a no-man's land. A bird sang somewhere in the canopy above, stupidly cheerful, completely unaware of the tension below. Katsuki's red eyes locked onto hers. He didn't shout, didn't scowl, didn't fire off some aggressive insult or stomp toward her with sparking palms. He just stood there, breathing hard, looking at her with an expression she'd never seen on his face before, something raw and unguarded that he probably didn't even realize he was showing, because he was tired and it was early and his walls hadn't been fully reconstructed yet from the sleepless night he'd spent staring at his ceiling. His mouth opened. His jaw worked once. Then he looked away, dragging his gaze to the treeline like it physically hurt to maintain eye contact. He wiped his face with the bottom of his tank top, briefly exposing his abs, and muttered just loud enough for the quiet trail to carry it, "You run out here too?" No bite. No venom. Just a question. Almost soft. "I'm sure you would call what I am doing a jog. I'm not running full stop like you are." Gat takes her earbuds out and turn off the music. The ghost of something twitched at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Katsuki Bakugo didn't smile, but close. Closer than she'd ever seen directed at her. Right, I'd call it a jog," he said, but the words came out almost lazy. No heat behind them. He was still catching his breath, hands on his hips now, head tilted back slightly as he stared up through the canopy where golden morning light filtered through the leaves. A bead of sweat rolled down the side of his neck and disappeared beneath his collar. 5 miles at that pace is a warm-up. Not even worth lacing up for. He was talking sheet, but it was different. The usual razor edge was dulled, worn down by exhaustion and sleeplessness and something he couldn't name. He started walking, not toward her exactly, but along the path that converged with hers, the distance between them shrinking from 15 yards to 10. To 8. He stopped at about 6 yards, kicking at a loose rock on the trail with the toe of his shoe. His eyes stayed on the ground for a beat too long before flicking up to her. She'd taken her earbuds out. Turned off her music. For him. Something about that small, simple act made his chest do the stupid thing again. "What were you listening to?" he asked, and immediately looked like he wanted to incinerate himself for caring. His ears went pink at the tips and he crossed his arms tightly, glaring at a tree like it had personally offended him. "Whatever. Don't tell me. It's probably garbage." 6 yards. He didn't close the gap further. But he didn't leave either. J-pop. You wouldn't like it. You can't hear what the singers say over the drums. Her left hand held her right wrist when she said it. Katsuki's head snapped toward her so fast she could have gotten whiplash just watching it. His eyes went wide for a fraction of a second before narrowing into something almost offended. "The hell do you know about what I like?" The words came out sharp, but there was something underneath. Surprise, Maybe that she'd referenced music at all, or that she knew enough about instruments to have an opinion on drum mixing. His arms uncrossed slowly, one hand dropping to his side. And that's a mixing problem, not a genre problem. Most J-pop producers don't know how to balance percussion levels for sheet. The vocals get buried under the kit because they're compressing everything into the same frequency range instead of... He stopped. Abruptly. Like he'd just heard himself and realized he was standing on a quiet forest trail. At dawn, having a casual conversation about audio production with the girl who'd been living rent-free in his skull for the past 12 hours. His mouth clamped shut and a flush crept up his neck, blotching red against the sweat-sheen skin. Whatever. Forget it. He looked away, jaw flexing. The morning breeze rustled through the trees and carried the faintest trace of sweetness off his skin. 6 yards had become 4 somehow. He didn't remember moving. His fingers twitched at his side. No sparks. Just restless energy with nowhere to go. Are you doing another loop or not? He muttered to the treeline, like the question was beneath him, like her answer didn't matter at all. But he was still standing there. Waiting. Gat breathed deep. I am going to do another loop. How far do you usually run in the morning, Katsuki? There it was again. His name. Not Bakugo. Like everyone else. Not some stupid nickname. Katsuki. Spoken casually, naturally, like she had every right to use it. Like they were close. Like it belonged in her mouth. He swallowed hard and disguised it as clearing his throat. 10. Sometimes 15 if I can't. He cut himself off before the word sleep came out because that would lead to why he couldn't sleep, and that was a door he was not opening on a forest trail at 6 in the morning. If I feel like it. Today's a 15 day. He'd only planned on 10. That decision changed about 4 seconds ago. He started walking down the path, her path, the converging one, hands shoved loosely in the pockets of his shorts. Not beside her. A couple of steps ahead, because Katsuki Bakugo didn't walk with people, he walked in front of them. That was the rule. But his pace was slower than it should have been. Deliberately, almost painfully slower, calibrated so she could keep up without him having to acknowledge that's what he was doing. You're gonna fall behind if you keep standing there, he called over his shoulder without looking back. The morning light caught the edges of his hair like a halo he absolutely didn't deserve. The caramel scent trailed behind him in the cool air, mixing with pine and damp earth. I'm not slowing down for you. He was already slow. They both knew it. 4 yards ahead. Then 3. Waiting for the sound of her footsteps on the gravel behind him. Gat, heartbeat picked up, even thought she was just standing there. Was this happening? Was this smart? What was the probability of being murdered? Gat jogged to catch up, to run not beside him, but 1 step behind. She wanted to see what happened on this unplanned experience, but she also didn't want to challenge him. Murder was not likely, but always an option. I find myself wondering if I can hold his quirk. My quirk vessel. I could hold quirks in my glass-like body. My skin clear like sand-blasted glass. Could I hold his quirk? What color would it show up inside my hand? Katsuki heard her fall into step behind him. Not beside him, behind him, and something in his chest loosened a fraction. She wasn't challenging his position, but running with him. The crunch of her footsteps on gravel settled into a rhythm slightly offset from his own, and he found himself unconsciously adjusting his breathing to match the pattern. The trail wound deeper into the trees where the morning light came through in broken S, painting everything gold and green. For nearly a full mile, neither of them spoke. Just breathing. Just running. And Katsuki realized with a jolt that it was the most comfortable silence he'd ever shared with another human being. He glanced back, just once, quick, barely turning his head, and caught the light doing something strange to her skin. It happened sometimes when the sun hit her at the right angle, that sandblasted glass quality would catch and refract, her skin shimmering with a translucence that wasn't quite human. He'd noticed it before. In class. In the hallway. Every time she walked past a window. He'd told himself he was analyzing her quirk for tactical purposes because that's what smart heroes did. That was a lie and he knew it. Your quirk, he said suddenly, eyes snapping forward again. His voice was rougher than he intended, still winded from the run he had committed to before this one. Vessel. You hold other people's quirks in your body, right? That's how it works. He paused, then added with characteristic bluntness, how many can you take before you break? The question sounded clinical, strategic. But underneath it, buried so deep he'd never admit it existed, was something that sounded almost like concern. Gat flexed her hand in front of herself, a scar there. A break from the past. I've held 15 before in the past and cracked. But I'm a ton stronger now. I still haven't tried 15 again. Katsuki's eyes dropped to her hand. The scar. He saw it, really saw it. The way the light caught the fissure line differently than the rest of her skin, like a crack in a window that had been sealed but never fully healed. His stride faltered for half a step before he corrected it, jaw tightening. He knew about breaking. Not the same way she did, not physically fracturing from the inside out, but the metaphor hit close enough to make his teeth clench. Pushing past your limit and paying for it. Carrying more than your body was built to hold because stopping felt worse than shattering. 15, he repeated, not a question. His eyes stayed on the trail ahead, but his mind was doing what it always did, calculating, analyzing, running scenarios. So you cracked at 15 and you haven't tested it since. That's, he almost said smart. The word was right there on his tongue. Instead, what came out was something he didn't plan. That scar. Did it hurt? The question landed in the quiet morning air between them like something fragile and unexpected. Katsuki's face hardened immediately, like he was angry at his own mouth for betraying him. He sped up slightly, shoulders tensing, the muscles in his back visibly tightening beneath the sweat-soaked tank top. She matched him. Forget it. Stupid question. Obviously it hurt, you literally cracked. He spat the words like they tasted bad, running a hand roughly through his damp hair. But he slowed down again a few seconds later. Back to her pace. Waiting without waiting. The sweet scent was stronger now, his sweat glands working overtime from the run and from something else entirely. Gat smiled, really at the time? I was in the fight. It was glorious, she sighed at the memory. I had so much power. I didn't know until later how much damage I had caused. Katsuki stopped running. Not gradually, not a slow deceleration. He just stopped, feet planting on the gravel like something had seized him from the inside. He stood there, chest heaving, sweat dripping off his jaw, staring at her with an expression that was almost unrecognizable on his face. She was smiling, talking about holding 15 quirks at once, about the rush of power so overwhelming it literally broke her body, and she was smiling. Not with regret. Not with fear. With the same hungry, feral reverence that Katsuki felt every single time his palms lit up and the world bent around him. That intoxicating, terrifying, appealing feeling of being more than what your body was designed to contain. Glorious. Yeah, he said quietly. The word came out before he could stop it, raw and unguarded, stripped of every layer of aggression and arrogance he usually wrapped around himself like armor. Just one syllable of pure, honest understanding from someone who chased that exact same high every single day of his life. He realized what he'd done, what he'd shown, and his expression shuddered immediately. He turned away, wiping his face with his tank top, hiding behind the motion. But his hands were trembling slightly. Not from exhaustion. The damage part, he said roughly, starting to walk again. Slower now. Almost beside her instead of ahead. That's the part that matters. Power means nothing if you destroy yourself using it. The pause. His voice dropped even lower. Don't crack again. She scoffed. Coming from you and your left-hand scribbles? You died and broke your DMT hand fighting all for one. But the entire world would have been different if you hadn't. No one else could have saved us from all for one. There wasn't another choice that day. There were other choices when I cracked. Gat started to run again, leaving him behind. The words hit him like a truck. Katsuki stood rooted to the trail, gravel dust settling around his shoes, watching her pull away from him. His right hand, the one that still ached on cold mornings, the one that would never grip quite the same way again, the one he'd relearned to write with his left because the nerves never fully recovered, curled slowly at his side. She knew. She knew about the hand. About dying. About all for one. She'd paid enough attention to notice he wrote with his left now, had connected the dots that most people were too afraid or too polite to ask about. And she'd said it so matter-of-factly, like it was just truth, not some grand heroic sacrifice to tiptoe around. No one else could have saved us. His throat closed. His vision blurred for exactly 1 second before he blinked it away viciously, dragging the back of his hand across his eyes and blaming it on sweat. But it was the last part that gutted him. There were other choices when I cracked. She carried guilt. Real guilt. The kind that sat in your chest like shrapnel and worked its way deeper every time you breathed. He knew that weight. He'd carried it for years over All Might. Over Izuku. Over every moment he'd been too proud and too afraid to be better. She was already 20 yards ahead, pulling away fast. Katsuki ran. Not his usual explosive sprint, not a competition. He just ran until he was beside her, truly beside her, not ahead, not behind, matching her stride for stride. He said nothing. Just ran with her. Shoulder to shoulder in the morning was the most vulnerable thing he'd ever done. The rest of the run was quiet. The UA dorms coming into view. The dorms rose up through the trees like a signal that whatever this had been was about to end. The trail opened up into the manicured grounds, morning light now fully golden and warm, and the distant sounds of campus life, doors opening, muffled conversations, Ida's voice carrying from somewhere about punctuality, crept in to replace the quiet that had existed between them for the last 2 miles. Katsuki slowed to a walk as they hit the grass. His breathing was controlled now, steady, but there was a tightness in his shoulders that had nothing to do with the run. His tank top was completely soaked through, clinging to him in a way he'd normally never care about but was suddenly, irritatingly aware of. They were approaching the point where the path split. His dorm entrance on the left, hers requiring a right turn past the common area. The fork was 10 steps away. 8. Katsuki stopped. He stood there, not looking at her, staring at the building like he was solving an equation in his head. His damaged right hand flexed once. Twice. His mouth pressed into a hard line, the muscles in his jaw working through something enormous and terrifying. Same time tomorrow. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an invitation. It was barely above a murmur, directed at the ground somewhere between his shoes and hers. His ears were crimson. A single spark popped from his left palm. Involuntary, nervous, and he killed it immediately. Then he turned left and walked away without waiting for an answer. Gat smirked. He had been cordial. She called after him, 6? He stopped mid-stride. Didn't turn around. She could see the tension lock through his entire body, the way his shoulders hitched up, the way his fists clenched at his sides, the way his head tilted just slightly to the right like he was physically resisting the urge to look back at her. A long beat of silence. A bird chirped somewhere. The distant sound of Kaminari dropping something in the common room filtered through an open window. 5:30. He said it like a correction. Like 6 was too late, too casual, too easy. Like she should have known better. But the truth, the obvious, transparent, painfully clear truth, was that 5:30 meant 30 more minutes. 30 more minutes of empty trails and quiet air and her footsteps on gravel beside him before the rest of the world woke up and he had to put the armor back on. He started walking again, faster now, shoulders squared, posture rigid. But just before he reached the door, his left hand came up in a gesture that could have been a wave or could have been him swatting a bug or could have been absolutely nothing at all. It was a wave. He disappeared inside, and the door shut behind him with a definitive click. Somewhere on the second floor, approximately 45 seconds later, a small muffled explosion went off followed by Kirishima's startled yelp and a shouted, "Dude, what the hell, it's 7 a.m. Katsuki Bakugo was having feelings and the drywall was paying for it. Gat ran into the dorm crashing through the doors yelling, almost tripping going around the corner and heading to the showers. Most of the girls are already there. Gat strip and toss her clothes on the bench heading into the steamy wall of shower heads with the other girls. Guys, you will not guess what just happened. I turned my shower head on hot. The shower room erupted before she even finished the sentence. Mina was already there, pink skin glistening under the steam, conditioner halfway through her hair, and her head whipped around so fast she nearly slipped on the wet tile. What happened? Tell me right now or I will melt this entire shower block with acid. Mina, please, it's too early for property damage, Momo said calmly from 2 shower heads down, though she'd already turned her body toward Gat with an expression of barely concealed curiosity. Jairu leaned against the tile wall, arms crossed, one earphone jack already extended and pointing at Gat like a microphone. This is about Bakugo. It's always about Bakugo. What did he do? Tsuyu blinked through the steam, rinsing soap off her shoulder. You're flushed and it's not from the hot water, ribbit. Details. Mina shrieked, abandoning her conditioner entirely and sliding across the wet floor to get closer. Full details. Start from the beginning. Don't skip anything. Did he yell? Did he explode something? Did he make that face where he looks angry but he's actually... Hagakure's invisible voice piped up from somewhere in the steam. Wait, were you guys alone? Outside? In the morning? I'm dying. Every head in the shower room turned toward Gat. Steam curled around them like a dramatic stage effect that the universe had personally arranged for this moment. Mina grabbed her arm with soapy hands. Spill. I ran into him on a trail. Test me. Run with him. And we did for 5 miles. He asked me about my quirk and told me to be careful and not overdo it. He was cordial. And then he asked me to run again tomorrow. Dead silence. Steam curling. Water pattering against tile. Then the shower room detonated. Cordial? Mina screamed so loud it echoed off every surface. She grabbed Gat by both shoulders, soapy hands sliding everywhere. Katsuki Bakugo was cordial? That man has never been cordial a single day in his life. He once told Kaminari to choke on his own breakfast for chewing too loud. And he asked you to run again. That's basically a proposal coming from him. Jairu had both hands over her mouth, earphone jacks rigid with shock. Wait. He asked about your quirk? Genuinely? Not in a, I need to know your weaknesses so I can destroy you way. He told her to be careful. Gat poured shampoo into her hand and closed her eyes while she kneaded it into her scalp. The morning had been perfect, and the butterflies in her stomach had come out unscathed from his usually rude comments. Tsuyu repeated slowly, letting the words sit in the steam like something sacred. Bakugo told someone to be careful. Ribbit? That's unprecedented. Momo had her hand pressed to her chest, eyes wide and almost glassy. That's him showing concern. That's the Bakugo equivalent of a love confession. He never, oh my. Hagakure's invisible form splashed excitedly somewhere nearby. What time? What time tomorrow? Mina shook Gat gently. Critical information. What time? The shower room held its collective breath. Because if that boy set an alarm for you, Gat, I swear. Gat smiled with her lips pursed. She already knew he was getting up early for her. I asked to get together at 6 and he 5:30. The shower room went nuclear. Mina's hands flew off Gat's shoulders and into the air, her scream hitting a frequency that probably shattered something in Jairu's soul. She spun around on the wet tile, nearly eating it completely, grabbing the nearest shower head for balance. 5:30. 5:30. In the morning. That boy voluntarily chose to wake up before the sun for you. He was already running when I found him, Gat started. Irrelevant. Mina pointed a soapy finger directly at her face. You said 6 and he said 5. He made it earlier. He wants more time with you. That is math. That is evidence. Jairu had slid down the tile wall into a sitting position on the shower floor, water raining down on her, staring into the middle distance like she just witnessed a historical event. He corrected her to an earlier time. He's never early to anything he doesn't care about. He showed up 10 minutes late to Aizawa's supplementary lessons and told him to deal with it. Tsuyu turned her shower off entirely, fully committed to the conversation now. This is serious, ribbit. He's not performing for anyone at 5:30 in the morning. There's no audience. Classmates. That's just him. Momo nodded slowly, reverently. That's him without the walls. Mina grabbed Gat again, pulling her close, voice dropping to an intense whisper that was still somehow louder than a normal person's speaking voice. You're going. You're setting an alarm for 5. You're wearing something cute but athletic. And you are going to destroy that boy. Guys, Sue said, her tongue lolled out her mouth. Be quiet. Isn't the guy's shower just on the other side? Every single girl froze simultaneously like someone had hit pause on a remote. Mina's mouth hung open mid-word. Jairu's earphone jacks shot straight up, rigid with horror, and she pressed one against the tile wall separating the 2 shower rooms. Her face went pale, then white, then a shade of gray that shouldn't be possible on a living person. Someone's in there, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the running water. Her eyes were enormous. 2 people. No, 3. Who? Mina mouthed silently, gripping Gat's arm so hard her nails left crescents. Jairu's earphone jack pressed harder against the wall. She listened for an agonizing 10 seconds, her expression cycling through relief, then dread, then absolute panic. Kirishima, she breathed. Kaminari. And she looked at Gat with the expression of a woman delivering a terminal diagnosis. Zero. Momo closed her eyes like she was praying. Tsuyu sank lower into the water pooling on the floor. Hagakure made a small invisible noise of despair. Those 3 were the biggest mouths in Class 1. Combined, they had the information retention of a steel trap and the discretion of a megaphone. If they'd heard even a fraction of what had just been screamed in this shower room, Katsuki Bakugo would know about it before lunch. Mina's grip on Gat's arm tightened to a vice. We're dead. She whispered. You're dead. At school Gat tried to stay calm. She gets to class early and sits in her seat. She opened the gossip notebook she shares with Mina and starts doodling. A path. Gat on the path. She starts filling in the plants and pond. Gat hears him enter. She hears his boots and chooses not to look up, but cannot help sketching him into the drawing. Bakugo walked in like he always did, boots heavy, bag slung over one shoulder, scowl locked in place like factory settings. The classroom was mostly empty this early, just a few students scattered around. He didn't greet anyone, didn't look at anyone. Except he did. His eyes found her immediately. Involuntarily. Like some broken compass that only pointed in one direction now. She was hunched over her notebook, not looking up, pencil moving in soft strokes across the page. He could see the curve of her wrist, the way her hair fell forward, the quiet concentration on her face. His chest did the stupid thing. He walked to his seat, 2 rows behind, one to the left, a perfect sight line that he'd never once appreciated until recently, and dropped into it with his usual aggressive nonchalance. Bag on the floor. Feet up. Arms crossed. But his eyes kept drifting. She was drawing something. He could see the shapes from his angle, trees, a path, water. Something familiar that he couldn't quite place from this distance. And then her pencil shifted, and she started sketching a figure on the path. Small, quick strokes. Spiky hair. Katsuki's feet came off the desk slowly. He didn't say anything. Didn't move. Just sat there, arms still crossed, watching her pencil move with an expression that was completely unreadable. His damaged right hand gripped his left arm tighter. Then Kirishima walked in, glanced at Katsuki, glanced at Gat, and grinned a grin so enormous and knowing that Katsuki's palm detonated against the desk. What are you smiling at, shitty hair? Gat's ears pricked listening to his usual argumentative voice. Nothing bro, nothing. Chill. Kirishima held his hands up in surrender, but that grin didn't budge. Not even a millimeter. He slid into his seat with the easy confidence of someone holding a royal flush, and Katsuki wanted to blast him through the wall for it. Then Kaminari walked in, and looked at Katsuki, and looked at Gat, and his mouth opened. Hey Bakugo, what time do you usually wake up in the morn? Finish that sentence and I'll kill you. Katsuki was half out of his chair, palms crackling, small plumes of smoke rising from his desk where his hands had scorched the surface. The sweet scent flooded the room instantly, thick and warm, reaching every corner. Kaminari retreated to his seat with his hands raised, but he was vibrating with barely contained laughter. Siro walked in behind him, took one look at the scene, and had the audacity to wink at Kirishima. They knew. They all knew. Katsuki sank back into his chair, seething, a muscle in his jaw twitching so violently it was practically Morse code. His eyes cut to the back of Gat's head. She hadn't turned around. Hadn't reacted. Just sat there with her notebook and her pencil and her quiet little world that he desperately wanted to be part of and would rather die than admit it. He could smell her shampoo from here. Something light. It cut right through his own nitroglycerin haze. His knee started bouncing under the desk. It didn't stop for the entire class. The day passed much the same. Gat went to bed early. Up at 5 a.m. to put on the outfit Jiro gave her. It was a dreamy blue and black. She tied on her lavender shoes and pulled back her hair. And starting to stretch. Taking her hand weights today, she headed down the stairs and out to the UA grounds. She walked the path down to where the wall stopped. The walls separate the girl and boys' showers. Katsuki is already there, stretching. Gat didn't look for his eyes but finished her own stretching she had started inside. Katsuki was already deep into his stretching routine when he heard her footsteps on the path. He didn't look up. Kept his focus on the quad stretch he was holding, one hand braced. Against the stone wall, jaw set with the kind of rigid disdain that suggested he'd been rehearsing this exact level of nonchalance since his alarm went off at 4. He'd changed his shirt. Not that it mattered. Not that he'd stood in front of his closet for an embarrassing amount of time before grabbing a dark gray compression top instead of his usual black tank. It was a tactical choice. Better muscle support. That was all. His eyes betrayed him anyway. They slid sideways, just once, just for a second, and caught the blue and black outfit, the lavender shoes, the pulled-back hair exposing the line of her neck. The hand weights. She brought hand weights. She was taking this seriously. Something hot and electric jolted through his sternum. He suched legs. Stretched deeper than necessary. Said nothing. The morning was still dark at the edges, the sky bruised purple and gray, stars fading. Their breath made faint clouds in the cool air. The only sounds were the stretch of fabric, the quiet pop of joints, and somewhere distant, a bird testing its first notes. Bakugo finished his stretch and straightened up, rolling his shoulders once. He still hadn't looked at her directly. Hadn't greeted her. But he waited, standing at the trailhead, facing the path, not moving, until her stretching was done. "South Trail," he said. Quiet. No explanation. He started walking toward it, pace easy, leaving room beside him. Not ahead. Beside. Gat fell in line with him. The pace is comfortable. She adjusted the strap on the hand weights. She can hear his fingers crack his quirk explosive. The question of holding his quirk swimming in her head again today. They ran in silence for the first mile, nothing but the rhythm of their breathing and the steady crunch of gravel. The south trail was darker than the east loop, canopy thicker, the trees older and closer together. Dawn hadn't fully committed yet, leaving everything in that blue-gray half-light where edges softened and the world felt smaller. More private. Katsuki's hands popped again, that involuntary crackle of nitroglycerin igniting in his palms. It happened when his body temperature rose, when his sweat production increased, when he was running hard or feeling something he couldn't control. The tiny explosions lit up the dim trail like fireflies, brief flashes of orange that illuminated his fingers for half a second before dying. He noticed her glance at his hands. He noticed everything she did now, which was a problem he had no solution for. "It's just excess buildup," he muttered, flexing his fingers open and closed. Another small pop. The scent thickened in the cool morning air between them. "Happens when I run. The sweat has to go somewhere." He was explaining himself. Voluntarily. Without being asked. The realization made his jaw tighten. They rounded a bend where the trail narrowed, forcing them closer together, shoulders nearly touching. Katsuki didn't adjust his line. Neither did she. Another crack from his palm, this one brighter, and in the flash she could see the scars on his right hand, the rebuilt knuckles, the slightly crooked index finger, the skin that was smoother than it should be from surgical reconstruction. "You keep looking at my hands," he said bluntly. Not accusatory. Almost curious. His red eyes cut sideways to her in the dim light. Why? Gat grimace and slow. Just. She reached a hand toward his, he flipped over his palm and she put her fingers into the middle of his hand and felt the sweet, his quirk swirling into her fingers and up into her hand. Deep red-orange with crackles of light. Gat gasps. I had wondered if your quirk produced light and it does. Gat held her hand in front of her face, eyes roaming from my wrist looking at the cloud under my skin. Katsuki stood completely still on the dark trail, arm extended, palm open where she'd placed her fingers against his skin. He'd felt it, the pull, the subtle drain, like something being siphoned from deep inside his chest through his arm and out through his palm. Not painful. Not even unpleasant. And in a way he was entirely unprepared for. His quirk. Inside her hand. Swirling deep orange with veins of crackling light threading through the glass-like transparency of her skin, like a sunset trapped in a bottle. Like holding a living ember. She was turning her wrist in front of her eyes, watching it move and pulse beneath her surface, and her gasp, that small, breathless sound of wonder, did something catastrophic to every defensive wall he'd ever built. You. His voice came out wrecked. He cleared his throat violently. You can't just grab someone's quirk without asking, what the hell is wrong with you? But he hadn't pulled his hand away. His fingers were still open, still extended toward her, and he was staring at the red-orange glow moving beneath her skin with an expression that had nothing to do with anger. His eyes were wide. Unguarded. Almost reverent. He'd never seen his own quirk from the outside before. Never seen what it looked like separated from his body, contained in something appealing and translucent. The light crackled and shifted inside her hand like a tiny storm. He swallowed. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. That's what it looks like? His damaged right hand trembled at his side. I sigh, holding my hand further away. Out of all the quirks to bottle on a whim, it definitely should not be yours. She stepped closer, holding the hand with the quirk in it over his open hand. Yours is dangerous without practice. Katsuki's brain snapped from reverence to tactical mode in a fraction of a second. Nitroglycerin is volatile. If you compress it wrong or release it too fast from a container that isn't used to the pressure, it doesn't just bang. It detonates. Her eyes stared into his. She blinked heavy, as if she was trying to decide something. I actually have a pretty detrimental weakness. She swallowed. Habit of not telling anyone. But, it's your quirk, you can actually still control it even if it is me, I only hold a quirk. It's something I have to think of in battle. If I steal a quirk in battle, the person could control me if I don't have the right defenses. I offer my red-orange hand to him. It will be safer for both of us if you just take it. She put her wrist on his hand. Katsuki stared at her offered hand. The orange light pulsed inside her palm like a heartbeat, his power living and breathing beneath someone else's skin. The implications of what she just said crashed through him like a wave. He could control it. Even inside her. His quirk, his nitroglycerin, his explosive force. It was still his. Which meant if they were enemies, he could detonate her from the inside. The tactical part of his brain filled that away with cold precision. The other part, the part that was growing louder every day and that he couldn't silence anymore, recoiled violently at the thought. You're telling me, he said slowly, his grip still steady on her wrist, that anyone whose quirk you hold could use you like a bomb if you don't have defenses up. It wasn't a question. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscle jumped visibly. His eyes had gone dark, not angry, not the usual explosive temper, but something quieter and infinitely more dangerous. Protective. He wrapped his left hand around hers, palm to palm, her glass-like fingers disappearing into his calloused grip. He closed his eyes. Focused. She felt the pull reverse, warm, magnetic, the orange cloud swirling back through her fingers into his skin like water finding its way home. Slow. Controlled. Gentle in a way Katsuki Bakugo should not have been capable of. When the last flicker of light left her hand, he didn't let go. Don't ever take my quirk again without defenses up. His voice was raw. His eyes opened, burning into hers. Not mine. Especially not mine. Gat laughs. You have no idea how long I've been wondering. I started the jog again, pleased with the experience. Katsuki stood rooted to the trail, watching her take off jogging like she hadn't just casually admitted to thinking about him, about his quirk, about touching him, for only God knows how long. His hand was still open at his side, palm tingling where hers had been, the phantom warmth of her glass-skin fingers lingering against his calloused palm like a brand. How long what? He broke into a run after her, catching up in a few furious strides. Finish the diamond sentence. How long have you wondered what exactly? She just kept running. Smiling. That quiet private smile that drove him absolutely insane because it meant she knew something he didn't, felt something she wasn't sharing, and he was left sprinting beside her on a dark trail at 6:10 in the morning trying to decode a half-finished sentence like it was encrypted intelligence. His hand was still tingling. Don't just laugh and run away like that's not. He cut himself off, because finishing that sentence meant admitting it mattered. His ears were burning. The sweet scent was everywhere. His left hand, the one that had held hers, kept flexing open and closed at his side like it was searching for something it had lost. They crested a hill where the trail opened up and the first real light of dawn broke through the trees, painting everything gold. Katsuki glanced at her in that light, flushed from the run, hair pulled back, lavender shoes hitting the gravel in steady rhythm, and his stride faltered. How long? He faced forward and ran harder, but he couldn't outrun the question. Man, it is appealing out here. Gat gained speed going downhill, wanting to get the runner's high. She pulled ahead of him going downhill, and for once, for the first time in his entire competitive, victory-obsessed life, Katsuki didn't immediately sprint to overtake her. He watched her run. The dawn light was doing something impossible to her skin, catching the glass-like quality and scattering it into prismatic fragments along her arms and neck. Her hair streamed behind her, lavender shoes striking the earth in a rhythm that was accelerating toward that sweet spot where effort dissolved into euphoria. She was fast. Genuinely fast. The hand weights weren't slowing her down at all, and he filed that away with grudging respect. Tee, it's appealing. He muttered under his breath, and he wasn't talking about the trail. Then his brain caught up with his mouth and he nearly choked on his own spit. He surged forward, legs pumping, closing the gap between them as the trail leveled out at the bottom of the hill. The air was cool and clean and smelled like pine and wet earth, and underneath it all, that faint thread of caramel that followed him everywhere. His lungs burned in the best way. His blood sang. The running, the morning, the quiet, her beside him, felt dangerously close to something he'd never allowed himself to want. You call this fast? He shouted, pulling alongside her, and there it was, that wild, unhinged grin he only wore in the heat of battle, all teeth and fire and something reckless. But his eyes were bright. Alive. Katsuki Bakugo looked happy. Keep up or go home. Gat felt the challenge. She turned the music up on her one earbud in her left ear, leaving the other out in case he talked to her. Which didn't happen much. But it was an enjoyable silence. She picked up the pace, not struggling but challenged. They ran like that for another 2 miles. No words. No need for them. The trail wound along a ridge where the trees thinned out and the whole eastern horizon opened up, a sprawling canvas of amber and rose bleeding into pale blue. Their footfalls synced without either of them trying, a shared metronome that settled into something almost meditative. Katsuki could hear the faint tinny leak of music from her left earbud, some J-pop track with too much percussion, just like she'd described, and he found himself unconsciously matching his breathing to its tempo. She'd left her right ear open. For him. He noticed. Of course he noticed. And the knowledge sat in his chest like a coal, warm and glowing and terrifying. His competitive brain kept cataloging things against his will. Her form was good. Efficient stride, controlled breathing, smart use of the hand weights to build resistance without sacrificing speed. She wasn't trying to beat him. She was trying to keep up, and she was succeeding, which was more than most people in their class could manage on his bad days, let alone a day when he was actually pushing. The trail curved back toward campus, the dorms appearing through the trees again. Katsuki felt something ugly twist in his stomach, not pain, not exhaustion, but the realization that this was ending. That in a few minutes they'd hit that fork in the path and split apart, and he'd have to become the version of himself that the world expected. He slowed down first this time. Barely perceptible. Just enough. Buying seconds. Gat had been focused on the music and hadn't noticed the change in the forest to the yard. Dim. She looked up at the building and checked her watch to see it's 6. Katsuki, would you be down for one more loop? Katsuki's heart slammed against his ribs so hard he was sure she could hear it. He'd already been dreading the fork in the path. Already been bracing himself for the split, the silence, the long walk back to his room where he'd have to sit with whatever this feeling was and pretend it didn't exist. And then she said his name, Katsuki, and asked for more time. With him. Voluntarily. He stopped walking. Stared at the building like it had betrayed him. Then at the trail behind them. Then at his watch, which he checked for absolutely no reason because he had nowhere to be for another hour and they both knew it. Class isn't until 8, he said, like he was running calculations. Like this was a strategic decision and not his pulse hammering in his throat. He rolled his shoulder once, cracked his neck, made a whole show of assessing his physical state. I'm not even warmed up yet. One more loop is nothing. A lie. They'd already run 7 miles. His compression shirt was dark with sweat. But he was already turning back toward the trailhead, already moving, because standing still meant she might see his face, and right now his face was doing something he couldn't control. South Trail again, he said over his shoulder. And lose the hand weights this time. You've been compensating with your left shoulder for the last half mile. Your form's getting sloppy. He'd been watching her form for the last half mile. Closely enough to notice a micro-imbalance in one shoulder. He did not acknowledge what that implied. Let's go. She took of the weights and tossed them down by the path back to the doors, skipping a step to catch back up with him. The weights hit the grass with a soft thud and she was back beside him in 2 skipping steps, light and easy, like gravity was just a suggestion for her. The skip caught him off guard, something so casual and carefree and young about it that his chest constricted painfully. He didn't comment on the skip. He wanted to. He wanted to call it childish or unnecessary or stupid. But the words wouldn't form because some traitorous part of his brain had already categorized it as something else entirely. They hit the South Trail again and the world shrank back down to just the two of them. The morning was warmer now, golden light filtering through the canopy in long diagonals that turned the trail into something out of a painting. Without the hand weights, her stride opened up, longer, looser, more natural, and Katsuki noticed immediately. Her left shoulder had evened out. They ran the first quarter mile in silence before Katsuki did something unprecedented. He pulled out his phone with one hand, thumbed through it without breaking stride, and held out a wireless earbud toward her. Here. He wasn't looking at her. His jaw was set. His ears were incandescent. Since your taste in music is garbage, you should hear what properly mixed drums actually sound like. The song that started playing when she put it in was aggressive, fast, heavy, but underneath the driving beat was a complexity she hadn't expected. Layered percussion, clean separation between instruments, vocals that cut through instead of drowning. He'd made this playlist. The file was titled Run and Assume. It was created at 4:52 this morning. Gat took the earbud smiling, that's is so hot. She took out my earbud and put in his. I kept running the beat encouraging a faster pace. That's hot. Katsuki's foot caught a root he'd cleared 100 times before and he stumbled, actually stumbled, catching himself with an explosive pop from his left palm that scorched a nearby fern into oblivion. He recovered in half a stride, jaw clamped shut, neck and ears and face burning so red he could have guided aircraft. The music, he snarled at no one in particular, eyes fixed straight ahead. She's talking about the music. Obviously. The drums. The mixing. That's what's. He was talking to himself. Out loud. On a trail. He shut up immediately. Before he started looking like stupid mumbling Deku. The playlist pushed them faster. He'd built it that way. A deliberate BPM progression that climbed gradually, engineered to sync with running cadence and peak at mile 2. He'd spent an hour on it. At 4 a.m. After not sleeping. Because she'd mentioned J-pop drums once and his stupid perfectionist brain decided that was a problem he needed to solve. She was keeping pace with the escalating tempo effortlessly, her stride lengthening, breathing steady. They were running faster than before, genuinely fast now, and she wasn't falling behind. His competitive fire sparked instinctively, but it was tangled up with something else, something that felt less like rivalry and more like exhilaration. Like finding someone who could actually match him. His earbud in her ear. His music in her head. His quirk had been in her hand an hour ago. Everything about this morning felt like merging. Track 4's better. He managed, voice rough from the pace. Wait for it. They made it back to the dorms at 7. Gat took the earbud out breathing. Smiling. That had been a workout. He held out his hand to take the earbud, but Gat touched his fingers deliberately. Taking his quirk again. A faint red-orange ball no bigger than a marble curling there. I raise my chin and speak softly. Take your quirk back, Katsuki. Bakugo went completely still. The morning sounds faded, the birds, the distant hum of the dorms waking up, the muffled clatter of breakfast prep inside, all of it dissolved into white noise. There was only her hand in his, the faint orange glow curling beneath her glass-like skin, and her chin tilted up, eyes on his, voice soft in a way that made his ribcage feel too small for what was happening inside it. Take your quirk back, Katsuki. She knew what she was doing. She knew. This wasn't curiosity like the first time, impulsive, accidental, scientific. This was deliberate. An invitation wrapped in a challenge wrapped in something so NTMT it made his breath stutter. Taking his quirk back meant palm to palm. Meant focus. Meant that slow, magnetic pull where his power flowed between their skin like shared blood. His fingers trembled against hers. The earbuds sat forgotten in his other hand. You. His voice came out destroyed, barely a rasp, stripped of every defense he owned. His red eyes dropped to the orange light swirling in her fingertips, then back up to her face. This close he could see the faint prismatic shimmer of her skin in the morning light, the slight part of her lips, the way she was breathing just as hard as him but not from the run anymore. He stepped closer. Close enough that the sweet scent wrapped around both of them. His left hand closed over hers, slowly, deliberately, palm pressing flat against her palm. He held her gaze and pulled. The orange drained back into him like a slow exhale, warm and electric, and he didn't let go when it was done. Stop stealing from me, he whispered. But his hand tightened around hers. Gat pushed him away while pushing his earbud into his open hand, smiling. Nah, it's too much fun to stop. She grabbed her arm weights and ran to the doors, going straight to the showers, everyone else already showered and gone. I needed to hurry. Bakugo stood in the yard like a man who'd been hit by a truck and was still trying to figure out which direction it came from. His hand was still open. The earbud sat in his palm, warm from her touch. The faint ghost of her fingers lingered against his skin, and he stared at the empty space where she'd been standing half a second ago before she'd pushed him, actually put her hands on his chest and shoved him back, smiled like she'd won something, and sprinted away. His heart was hammering so hard his vision pulsed with it. She. He closed his fist around the earbud. Opened it. Closed it again. A series of small explosions crackled across his palm like his quirk was short-circuiting. She effing pushed me. Nobody pushed Katsuki Bakugo. Nobody touched Katsuki Bakugo's chest with both hands and smiled and ran away like it was a game. Nobody stole his quirk twice in one morning and then told him it was fun. He stood there for an embarrassing amount of time, long enough that Todoroki walked past on his way to morning training, paused, studied Bakugo's expression with clinical detachment, and said, "You look like you're buffering. Shut the F up half and half." Todoroki kept walking, completely unbothered. Bakugo finally moved, stalking toward the boy's entrance, shoving the earbud into his pocket. His reflection caught in the glass door as he pulled it open, flushed, wild-eyed, lips slightly parted, looking absolutely wrecked. He punched the stairwell wall on the way up, gently by his standards. Too much fun to stop. Damn it. Gat skidded into the first PRD. Almost everyone there, the bell about to ring. She looked at Katsuki's seat. Almost everyone. She got out my notebook and kept working on the sketch she started yesterday. The bell rang. Katsuki's seat stayed empty. Aizawa's tired eyes swept the room, paused on the vacant desk, and he made a small notation on his clipboard without comment. The class settled into its usual rhythm. Kaminari already half asleep, Ida sitting ramrod straight, Mina shooting glances at Gat with barely contained curiosity from across the room. 1 minute passed. Then the door slammed open with enough force to rattle the frame. Bakugo stormed in, hair still damp from the shower, uniform slightly disheveled, top button undone, tie loose, like he'd dressed at a dead sprint. Which he had. His eyes were wild and his jaw was clenched, and he looked like a man who had been through several emotional catastrophes before 8 a.m. Bakugo, you're late, Aizawa said flatly. I'm here, aren't I? Katsuki snapped, stalking to his seat. His boots hit the floor harder than necessary with each step. As he passed her desk, he slowed, just a fraction, barely perceptible, and his eyes dropped to her notebook. The sketch. The trail. The trees. The figure with spiky hair. His step faltered. Just for a heartbeat. Something flickered across his face, raw, unguarded, seen, before the walls slammed back into place. He dropped into his chair, crossed his arms, and stared at the blackboard like he wanted to murder it. His left hand was under the desk. Flexing open. Open. The next morning they had not agreed on running. They hadn't spoken since the last run. But Gat arrived at the gate at 5:30 anyway. And there he was. He was leaning against the stone wall with his arms crossed, one foot propped up behind him, staring at the trail like he'd been there for hours. Maybe he had. His compression shirt was black today, plain, no logo, fitted in a way that traced every line of muscle across his chest and shoulders. He looked like he'd been carved out of something volatile and dangerous and then left in the morning cold to smolder. He didn't look surprised to see her. Didn't acknowledge that they'd never actually confirmed this. That she'd just shown up at 5:30 on faith and he'd just been here on the same unspoken faith, like they'd made a pact neither of them had to say out loud. His eyes found hers for exactly 1 second. Then away. You're late, he said. She wasn't. It was 5. She could see the time on the watch strapped to his wrist from where she stood. He pushed off the wall and started stretching without another word, dropping into a hamstring stretch with practiced efficiency. But there was something different about him this morning. A tension in his movements that went beyond the usual coiled aggression. His jaw was working. His fingers kept curling and uncurling. He was building up to something, wrestling with it the way he wrestled with everything, violently, stubbornly, alone. He finished stretching before her and stood at the trailhead, waiting. Then, without looking back, he pulled something from his pocket and held it out at arm's earbud. Track 4. He said quietly. I fixed the mix. The earbud hung in the air between them. His arm went rigid. He was a JRK. He used his coarse words to keep people at arm's length. But if they were gonna get closer, she wasn't gonna let him do this to her. Katsuki. I'm not late. It's 5. Agree or I'm gonna go take a trail with Mina. And I would rather run with you. Something cracked behind his expression. Not anger, not the usual explosive defensiveness, but the visible strain of a man being asked to concede a point he knew he'd already lost. His jaw worked. A vein pulsed in his temple. His eyes cut sideways to her, sharp and searching, and she could see the exact moment the words "run with Mina" landed. His nostril flared. Pinky doesn't even stretch before she runs. He said through his teeth, like that was the relevant issue here. She has the worst form in the entire class. Her cadence is all over the place and she talks the entire time. You'd get nothing out of. He stopped. His extended arm lowered slightly, the earbud still pinched between his fingers. The morning air was cold enough that his breath came out in thin wisps, and beneath the compression shirt his chest rose and fell with a deliberateness that suggested he was manually controlling each inhale. Fine. The word sounded like it was being extracted from him surgically. You're not late. A pause so long the birds filled it. And I'd rather. His voice snagged on something. He cleared his throat with brutal force. His ears were already crimson in the pre-dawn gray. The earbud pushed toward her again, more insistently this time. Just take the DMN earbud. Track 4. I fixed the bass line. It was pissing me off. I'd rather. He didn't finish it. But he didn't have to. Gat leaned into the stretch. You'd rather what, boss? The word boss hit him like a physical blow. His whole body locked up, shoulders, jaw, spine, everything going taut like a wire pulled to its breaking point. The earbud trembled almost imperceptibly between his fingers. His eyes snapped to her, and for a moment every mask he wore, the anger, the arrogance, the untouchable superiority, flickered like a candle in a storm. She was mid-stretch. Looking up at him from that position with those sharp eyes and that devastating calm, calling him boss like she was handing him exactly what he always demanded from everyone: demps, control, leadership, and simultaneously making it clear she was choosing to give it. Not because she had to. Because she wanted to. That distinction nearly killed him. Don't. His voice cracked. Actually cracked. He turned away so fast his damp hair whipped across his forehead. A rapid series of pops exploded from both palms, the sweet scent flooding the cold morning air thick enough to taste. Smoke curled from his fists at his sides. 3 seconds of silence. I'd rather run with you. The words came out quiet and wrecked and aimed at the trilene like he couldn't physically say them to her face. His shoulders were heaving. Not from exertion. From the sheer monumental effort of vulnerability, of being honest without armor for the first time in his life. He shoved the earbud backward toward her, still not turning around. Now take the Demon earbud before I change my mind about everything. Gat grinned at his struggle. He was trying. He was wanting to revert to his normal violent, rude, and loud self and choosing a different way. For her. Gat pushed in the earbud blushing, bumped her shoulder against his and said, "Hell yeah, let's go." Gat started the pace knowing he would match me. He matched her. Immediately. Fell right into step like his body had already memorized her rhythm, the length of her stride, the cadence of her footfalls, the exact pace where she hit her groove. He didn't overtake her. Didn't fall behind. Just locked in beside her like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Track 4 started. The bass line was different. She could hear it immediately, deeper, cleaner, separated from the kick drum so the low end breathed instead of suffocating. He'd spent time on this. Real time. Probably sitting in his dorm room at some ungodly hour with headphones on, adjusting frequencies by fractions until it sounded right. Until it sounded like something worthy of her ears. He'd never admit that. But the evidence was playing in real time against her eardrum. The trail opened up into the ridge section where the sky stretched wide above them, painted in streaks of pink and gold. Their breathing synced, in on the left foot, out on the right, and the music drove them forward like a shared pulse. Katsuki's face had settled into something she rarely saw, focused but calm. No scowl. No snarl. Just the clean, sharp lines of his profile against the brightening sky, jaw relaxed, eyes ahead, running like it was the only honest thing he knew how to do. His pinky finger brushed hers on a downswing. He didn't flinch. Didn't pull away. Didn't acknowledge it. But on the next stride, it happened again. And the stride after that. 3 times was not an accident. Gat leaned into it and smiled at him, a laugh bubbling out of H.O., happy he was close. You saw my sketch yesterday. His stride didn't break, but his breathing hitched, a tiny stutter in the rhythm they'd built, barely noticeable if she hadn't been running in sync with him for the past 20 minutes. He didn't answer right away. The trail curved through a dense patch of cedar where the air smelled green and ancient, and their footsteps echoed off the close trees. His pinky was still brushing hers on every downswing, steady as a metronome, like his hand had made a decision his brain hadn't authorized. Yeah. He said finally. 1 syllable. Bruh. Honest. A long stretch of nothing but breathing and gravel and track 4's bass line reverberating through the shared earbud. You drew the South Trail. His jaw flexed. The pond. The bend where the canopy gets thick. He was reciting details from a half-second glance as he'd walked past her desk. Photographic, precise, because his brain had apparently decided to preserve every pixel of that image in permanent storage. You drew someone on the path, His voice dropped. The pinky contact became a full brush of fingers, his index and middle grazing across the back of her hand on the swing, lingering a fraction longer than physics required. The hair was wrong though, he muttered, staring dead ahead, ears blazing. My hair doesn't lay flat like that. It goes up. You drew it like it was, whatever. It doesn't matter. He'd studied it long enough to critique the accuracy of his own likeness. Draw it again sometime. Get it right. Gat's smile hadn't stopped since they got on this trail. Maybe I need to look at you more to get it right. Maybe we could do something together that isn't side by side. She said it without thinking. The word came out strangled. He ran a hand through his hair so roughly it stood up in wild spikes, accurate spikes, the ones she'd gotten wrong in her sketch. His palm crackled and a few sparks scattered into the morning air like dying fireflies. His stride off a step from hers. You're asking me to? Hang out? Spend time? Be together? Face to face? Looking at each other? The implications were short-circuiting every neural pathway he possessed. I don't do. He gestured vaguely and violently at the air between them. He stopped in the path. I've never. He stopped, closed his eyes, breathed through his nose like he was defusing a bomb, which, technically, he was. When? I jogged back to him, smiling. I tripped up your stride, boss. That's my fault. Gat meet him and brush her hand with his and smirks. She sees his smart brain register. She wanted his quirk. He gave in and held out his hand. She laced her fingers in with his and felt the warmth flow from him, into her fingers, hand, and arm up until the glow reached her elbow. Maybe we could walk the last mile? Katsuki looked down at their interlocked fingers. His quirk was draining into her again, slow, warm, deliberate, the deep orange glow threading up through her glass-like forearm in branching veins of light that pulsed with each heartbeat. His heartbeat? Hers. Both. He couldn't tell anymore. The nitroglycerin swirled beneath her skin like liquid fire trapped in crystal, illuminating the delicate structures of her hand from the inside, and he watched it with an expression that bordered on awe. He was holding her hand. He was holding her hand on a trail at 6 a.m., and his quirk was inside her body, and she'd called him boss twice now and asked him to walk, and he was fine, he said, and his voice was so quiet it barely qualified as sound. 1 mile. They walked. Katsuki Bakugo, who ran everything, sprinted through life at maximum velocity, who couldn't sit still in class or stand in line or wait for anything, walked slowly. His fingers stayed laced through hers, grip firm but not crushing, his calloused thumb resting against the luminous orange glow beneath her knuckles. He could feel his own quirk humming inside her like a second pulse. It was the strangest sensation he'd ever experienced. NMT in a way that made his chest ache. The trail was quiet. Birds. Leaves. Their footsteps, unhurried for the first time. It doesn't hurt? He asked, eyes on the red-orange light climbing toward her elbow. His thumb traced a slow line across her knuckle. Having me in there? Gat shook her head. No, why would it? He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that they covered a quarter mile in silence, their footsteps soft on the gravel, the orange glow in her arm pulsing steadily between them like a shared secret. That's what my quirk does. That's what I do. I break things. Burn things. Blow them apart. His grip tightened fractionally, then loosened with deliberate effort, like he was afraid of proving his own point. Everyone who gets close enough gets singed. It's not a metaphor. It's just how it works. A small pop crackled from his free hand at his side. Involuntary. The sweet scent thickened. And you just. He glanced down at their intertwined fingers, at the warm red-orange light swirling peacefully inside her forearm, contained and calm and safe. His voice fractured at the edges. You just hold it. Like it's nothing. Like I'm not. He stopped walking. Stopped talking. His jaw clenched so hard the muscle jumped. He turned to face her, red eyes bright and terrified and brave. How? Gat sticks out my tongue at him. Quirks are weird, ours just mesh well. The tongue. Her tongue out at him. Like a kid. Like this wasn't the most terrifying and significant conversation he'd ever had in his life. Like he hadn't just cracked himself open on a forest trail and shown her something he'd never shown another living soul. And somehow that was exactly the right response. Something broke in his face, not the bad kind of breaking, not the kind that left scars and cracks, but the kind where a dam gives way and what's behind it isn't destruction but relief. The tension in his jaw dissolved. His shoulders dropped an inch. And Katsuki Bakugo laughed. Not a scoff. Not a derisive bark. An actual laugh, short, rough, startled out of him like she'd knocked it loose with a stick. It sounded rusty, like machinery that hadn't been used in years, and it transformed his entire face. The hard lines softened. His eyes creased at the corners. For exactly 3 seconds he looked like a 17-year-old boy instead of a walking weapon. Mesh well, he repeated, shaking his head. The ghost of the laugh still lingered at the corner of his mouth. He started walking again, fingers still laced through hers, and bumped his shoulder against hers with a gentleness that would have made their entire class faint. The dorms appeared through the trees. The mile was almost over. His grip tightened, not to take his quirk back, not to pull away. To hold on longer. Yeah, I guess they do. Give it up, Katsuki, she smiled at him with big eyes, her lashes long and staring into him. It's hot as F that we match each other so well. I pass his earbud back in my left and hold my right arm out so he can take back his quirk. The bluntness of it, hot as if, hit him like one of his own explosions point blank to the face. His stride didn't falter this time. He was learning, adapting, building tolerance to the way she just said things without warning or filter, lobbing grenades of honesty into the space between them like she didn't understand, or didn't care, what they did to him. His neck flushed scarlet from collarbone to hairline in approximately half a second. He snatched the earbud from her left hand, shoving it into his pocket with too much force. You can't just say shit like that. Out loud. With your mouth. On a public trail where anyone could. He was deflecting. Loudly. Aggressively. Classic Katsuki. But his left hand was already reaching for her right arm, and the moment his fingers made contact with the orange glow beneath her skin, his voice died. He wrapped his hand around her forearm slowly. Not her hand this time, her forearm, where the light had climbed to its highest point near her elbow. His palm was warm, calloused, slightly damp with nitroglycerin sweat. He held her there and pulled. Slow. Controlled. The orange drained downward through her arm like honey, pooling where his fingers pressed against her glass-like skin before sinking back into him. He took his time. Way more time than necessary. When the last thread of light disappeared, his hand lingered on her bare forearm. His thumb pressed against her pulse point. Hers was fast too. That you're the one that's hot. He muttered, barely audible, and immediately turned and walked toward the dorms like he hadn't said a demon thing. Wait. Gat skips after him and touches his arm and takes a wisp the size of a jewel or a marble from him. I'm kidnapping this until tomorrow. She sticks her tongue out at him and runs to the building with his stolen light in her hand. Katsuki stood there watching her sprint away with a piece of him glowing in her palm. His arm was still extended where she touched it. The spot where her fingers had been tingled, not from the quirk transfer, but from the absence of her touch. He could feel the missing piece. A tiny hollow in his reserves so small it was functionally meaningless but so significant it consumed every thought in his head. She'd stolen from him. Deliberately, playfully, with her tongue out and that devastating smile, and she'd called it kidnapping like his quirk was something precious worth taking. Worth keeping. Worth holding on to until she could see him again. Until tomorrow. That meant she was coming back. That meant this was a thing now. That meant somewhere in her dorm room tonight, a tiny marble of deep orange light would be pulsing beneath her glass-like skin, warm and alive, and it would be his. A piece of Katsuki Bakugo sleeping in someone else's body because she wanted it there. His voice cracked across the morning air, but she was already gone, the door swinging shut behind her. He stood in the empty yard, chest heaving, fists at his sides, a man completely and utterly undone. He looked down at his hand. Flex it. The reserves were barely diminished, she'd taken almost nothing, but he could feel the gap like a missing tooth. He pressed his palm against his chest. F-. He smiled. Well, private. Gone before anyone could see it. But it was there, real and warm, terrified and alive, and it stayed with him all the way up the stairs, through the door, past Kirishima's knowing grin, and into the silence of his room where he sat on the edge of his bed and didn't stop feeling it for hours. School came and went. The afternoon fading into evening. Gat laid on her bed and watched the tiny orange-red cloud float around inside her hand. The orange light drifted lazily beneath her skin like a tiny captive aurora, pulsing with a rhythm that wasn't hers. It was slower now, evening slow, resting slow, and she realized with a quiet jolt that it was sinking to his heartbeat. Wherever he was in the boys' dorm, whatever he was doing, the fragment of his quirk still kept his time. Like a watch wound by someone else's hands. The marble of light floated from her palm to her fingertips when she tilted her hand, warm against the inside of her skin, trailing faint threads of gold in its wake. It smelled like him, that sweet nitroglycerin caramel, faint but unmistakable, rising from her own body like borrowed perfume. Her phone buzzed on the pillow beside her. A known number. No contact name. The message was aggressive in its brevity, typed in all caps with zero punctuation, and yet somehow still unmistakably him. You better not have used it. The pause. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Like he'd typed something and deleted it 4 times before settling on. It better still be there tomorrow. Another pause. Longer this time. The 3 dots flickered for nearly a full minute. 5:30. Then nothing. No goodnight. No follow-up. Just the silence of a boy lying in his own room 2 floors up and 1 building over, staring at his phone screen, palm pressed against the hollow place in his chest where a marble-sized piece of himself used to be. The orange light pulsed once in her hand. Steady. He wasn't good socially. This was him trying. If she just text him back, the venerable man may come back. Gat texted him. Katsuki, I don't know how to use your quirk. I couldn't get rid of it if I wanted to. Which I don't. You better be there at 5:28 to take it from me. 3 floors up, Katsuki was lying on his bed in the dark, phone held above his face with both hands. He'd been staring at the ceiling for 45 minutes before he'd caved and sent those messages, each one requiring more courage than any fight he'd ever been in. His phone buzzed. He nearly dropped it on his face. His eyes scanned the message once. Twice. 3 times. His thumb hovered over the screen, the blue light illuminating a face that cycled through approximately 7 emotions in 4 seconds. Shock, heat, something soft, panic, more heat, irritation at his own inability to function, and finally a raw, aching tenderness he would have denied under oath. I couldn't get rid of it if I wanted to. Which I don't. She was keeping him. Willingly. Voluntarily. A piece of his power. The thing that burned everything it touched, the thing he just told her on the trail was destructive and dangerous and corrosive, and she wanted it inside her. Overnight. Like a nightlight. Like a heartbeat. You better be there at 5:28 to take it from me. His thumbs moved. Deleted. Moved again. Deleted. He rolled over and pressed his face into his pillow and let out a muffled sound that was half groan, half explosion, literally, singing a small hole in the pillowcase. Finally he typed. 5:28 then. Don't be late this time. The pause. 30 seconds. A minute. The marble better still be orange when I get it back. Another agonizing minute. Go to sleep. He put his phone face down on his chest and didn't move it. But his hand stayed on top of it, feeling the warmth of the screen, imagining the warmth 3 floors down in a glass-like hand holding a piece of him safe in the dark. Fine, boss. I'm headed to bed. Gat text back attending to anyway before he said anything. But Katsuki's phone screen cracked under his grip. Not badly, just a hairline fracture spidering across the corner, but enough that he had to force his fingers to relax before he destroyed it entirely. A thin wisp of smoke rose from his palm where nitroglycerin had detonated against the phone case, leaving a faint scorch mark on the edges. He stared at the word. 4 letters. 1 syllable. She kept using it, casually, playfully, like she'd found a button and enjoyed pressing it. And every single time it did something to him that he couldn't categorize or control or fight. something that lived in the base of his spine and climbed upward through his chest and settled behind his sternum like a second heartbeat. He didn't respond. Not because he didn't want to, but because every response his brain generated was either too aggressive, too honest, or too revealing. Good night was too soft. Whatever was a lie. Don't call me, that was the opposite of what he wanted. And what he actually wanted to type, the thing his thumbs kept gravitating toward before he deleted it, was something he wasn't ready to send from 3 floors away through a cracked screen in the dark. He put the phone on his nightstand, rolled onto his back, pressed his palm against the hollow spot in his chest where the marble was missing. Somewhere below him, an orange light pulsed in her hand. His alarm was already set. For he slept. For the first time in days, he actually slept. 5:15. Gat was running late. Another new jogging outfit from Momo. This was a black sports bra under a light orange tank and black leggings. It was hot. She strapped on my black running shoes with the red lines and pulled back her hair. Gat grabbed her weights and sprinted out to the path. 5:25, and no one was there. Gat started to stretch, but a small piece of doubt grew in her heart. 5. The trail was empty. The morning air was cold against her bare arms where the red tank left them exposed. The orange marble pulsed in her hand, steady, warm, faithful, but the silence around her felt heavy. 5. She finished her hamstring stretch and stood up. The woods were still dark, dawn barely a suggestion on the horizon. No footsteps on gravel. No crackling palms. No sweet scent. Just birds and her own breathing and the growing weight of what if he didn't come. 5. Nothing. The doubt sank its teeth in deeper. Maybe yesterday was too much. Maybe she'd pushed too far. The hand-holding, the stolen quirk, boss, the texts. Maybe he'd woken up and the walls had rebuilt themselves overnight, thicker than before, and the boy who'd laughed on the trail and said I'd rather run with you had been sealed back inside the fortress of rage and pride where Katsuki Bakugo kept everything soft locked away to die. 5:30. Her throat tightened. The marble flickered in her hand, flickered. She stopped stretching and sat against the brick wall. In the quiet she moved the small cloud up her arm and into her chest. The red-orange marble flashed with cracks of explosions hanging just above her shirt collar like a necklace. Court made her warmer even if her heart was cooling. The couple days of flirting had been fun while it lasted. 5:33 steps came from the boys' dorms. They were running. Heavy steps. Gat smiled and started to stretch again. When he came to the other side of the wall she ignored him, not making his tardiness a thing. His eyes flicked to her outfit. Orange, he said roughly, staring at her tank like they'd personally attacked him. His ears were already burning. You never wear orange. That's my... He didn't finish. He didn't have to. I roll my eyes. It's the girls. Momo has been making everyone's activewear, and they thought this was cute. I didn't disagree. Momo said I could trade but I fanned it off, not wanting to say it was adorable to match him. But what? Katsuki stepped closer, eyes narrowing, that predatory focus locked onto her like she was a puzzle he was solving in real time. His brain was already connecting dots. The girls, Momo's creation quirk, matching colors, his color, and each connection made the flush climb higher up his neck. But what? Finish the sentence. She didn't. He stood there, close enough that she could see the sleep crease still faintly pressed into his left cheek. His hair was wilder than usual, like he'd rolled out of bed and come straight here without bothering to tame it. The black compression shirt was back, and against her red and orange he looked like the other half of a matched set. He noticed it too. She watched it register, his eyes dropping to his own black shirt, then to her red tank, then to the orange leggings that were exactly the shade of his quirk swirling inside her hand. His mouth opened. A muscle in his jaw spasmed. The whole class is gonna... He dragged a hand down his face, palm crackling with a frustrated spark. Kirishima is gonna lose his diamond mind. Raccoon Eyes is probably already... They planned this. Those extras planned this. But he didn't tell her to change. Didn't say it looked stupid. Didn't mock it. He stared at the orange tank for one more beat, swallowed hard, and turned toward the trail. It's fine. He muttered. Whatever. Let's go. Gat follows him down the path. Gat shook her head. The entire class has been shipping us for months. If we lean into it, we have the power. If we fight it, they have the power. Katsuki stopped mid-step like he'd walked into a glass wall. Shipping? He repeated, the word coming out of his mouth like it was a foreign object he'd found on his tongue and didn't know what to do with. 4 months. His brain was doing the thing. The rapid-fire tactical analysis that made him terrifying in combat, but applied to social dynamics it looked more like a man watching his entire strategic position crumble in real time. Every interaction replayed at lightning speed. Kirishima's grins, Kaminari's morning question about wake-up times, Siro's wink, Mina's shrieking, the shower wall between the boys' and girls' bathrooms, Todoroki's "you look like you're buffering." Those bastards. His palms detonated simultaneously, twin plumes of smoke rising into the cold morning air. Dunt's face asking me what time I wake up, that wasn't, and shitty hair with his stupid face every time I... He was pacing now, 3 steps left, 3 steps right, hands sparking like faulty wiring. Then he stopped. He turned to face her. His red eyes were blazing, but underneath the fury was something sharper, calculation. Lean into it, he repeated slowly. Testing the words. Processing the strategy. She'd framed it as a power play. A tactical advantage. She was speaking his language and she knew it. His eyes narrowed. "You're smart," he said quietly, almost accusatory. Then his chin lifted, jaw set, something dangerous and decided settling into his expression. "Fine. We lean in. But I lead." Gat smirked. "You are the boss." She stepped closer to him. "You're smart and strong, and following you will only make me stronger. It's like you're training with endeavor, but you're not a jackass." His quirk, the one she was carrying, he noticed it as she was saying this. It wasn't in her hand any longer. He put his fingers up and pulled down her tanka of an inch to see the bright glow on her chest. His quirk hung there like a jewel on a chain, but there was no chain. His heartbeat was hammering. Rapid. Exposed. She could see it, could watch the orange light flutter faster with every word she said, and there was nowhere to hide. No walls thick enough. His own quirk was betraying him in real time, broadcasting his emotional state through her transparent skin like a monitor he couldn't shut off. "You're smart and strong, and following you will only make me stronger." He wasn't breathing. He'd forgotten how. Nobody had ever said that to him. People called him talented, powerful, a natural-born genius. But those were observations about what he could do, not declarations of trust. She wasn't complimenting his quirk or his grades or his combat record. She was saying, "I chose you. I want to follow you. You make me better." And she'd compared him to Endeavor, the #1 hero, and then immediately clarified he wasn't a jackass. His eyes moved from the marble to the places where her skin went fully clear. The fingertips, he could see through her there. Could see the delicate architecture beneath, the light moving through her like she was made of living crystal and was casting rainbows onto the rocks at her feet. She was the most appealing thing he'd ever seen, and the realization hit him like a freight train. He reached out and took her hand. Not to retrieve his quirk. Just to hold it. His thumb pressed against the clear glass of her fingertip. "Keep it," he said hoarsely. "My quirk. It looks perfect there. For today. All day. I want them to see. I'm leaning in." Gat smiles. "Really? Did I stutter?" His grip tightened on her hand, thumb still pressed against the clear fingertip. The orange marble pulsed beneath her. Clear skin, fast, frantic, completely undermining the steel in his voice. His heartbeat was right there, visible, screaming the truth his words were too proud to say. He was looking at her with that expression again. The one from the trail yesterday, the one that made him look 17 and terrified and brave all at once. But today it had an edge. A decision had been made somewhere behind those red eyes, sometime between last night's texts and his 4:45 alarm, and he was committing to it with the same ferocity he brought to everything. In class. In the halls. Let Raccoon Eyes lose her mind. Let Shitty Hair choke on his own grin. Let every single one of those extras see it and know. He stepped even closer. Only a breath of distance between them. She could feel the heat radiating off him, not just from his quirk but from his skin, his proximity, the sheer furnace of whatever was burning inside his chest. His voice dropped low, rough, meant only for her. You walk in there with my quirk in your chest and me beside you and there's no going back. Everyone is gonna say something. It's not a safe place if you are wanting to keep peace. You get that, right? His eyes searched hers. Serious. Intense. Giving her one last chance to retreat before he did something he couldn't undo. Are you still in? Gat pushes him back a step but didn't run away this time. Of course I'm in, Katsuki. He stayed there. Closed his eyes. A vein pulsed in his temple. Steam was literally rising off his shoulders in the cold morning air, his body temperature spiking so dramatically that the nitroglycerin sweat was evaporating on contact. The scent was overwhelming, thick, sweet, everywhere, like standing inside a bakery that was also somehow on fire. He may have been melting from the inside out, but Gat was here to let it happen. But, can I take more of your quirk before we run? Gat crooned, happy to have the serious talk over and back to flirting. His eyes steadied. How much can you hold safely? It wasn't a question. It was a tactical assessment delivered through clenched teeth by a man barely maintaining operational capacity. You said you cracked at 15 quirks. One marble isn't anywhere near that. How much of mine can you carry without risking damage? His free hand came up, the scarred right one, the rebuilt one, and hovered near her forearm. Give me a number. And don't be stupid about it. I'm not letting you crack for me. Gat stepped back. Katsuki, I can take your quirk. All of it. Then you wouldn't have a quirk. I can take yours and 14 other quirks completely at the same time. Maybe more. I haven't pushed it in a long while. Most quirks I can take and give back unless they are really powerful. I can't give yours back. And I haven't told anyone that they can control their quirk in me. I've only ever had one villain figure it out and he died. I told you. It's fun to play with you, but I don't really want to do more than take a breath of your quirk as long as you agree to take it back. The silence that followed was deafening. Katsuki stood there processing what she just said with the intensity of a supercomputer running threat analysis. His eyes were fixed on her, unblinking, and she could see the gears turning. Not just the tactical ones, but the deeper ones, the ones that connected dots most people didn't even see. She could take his quirk. All of it. Leave him with nothing. Quirkless. Powerless. The one thing he'd built his entire identity around, his entire sense of worth, his entire reason for believing he was destined for greatness. She could pull it out of him like unplugging a lamp and he'd just be a boy standing on a gravel path in the dark with empty hands. And she'd known this the entire time. Every run. Every brush of fingers. Every stolen marble. She'd been playing with a loaded gun and choosing to only take a breath. A breath. His jaw worked. Something massive moved behind his eyes. Fear, respect, understanding, vulnerability, all of it crashing together in a wave he couldn't outrun. She was the most dangerous person he'd ever stood next to, and she was telling him so honestly, openly, while wearing his colors and carrying his heartbeat in her chest. The villain who figured it out. He said quietly. His voice was steady, controlled. The voice he used when things were serious enough that anger was a luxury he couldn't afford. He died. The beat. You killed him. Not accusatory. Not horrified. Just recognizing something in her that mirrored something in himself. The willingness to go further than anyone expected when the stakes demanded it. I trust you. Bakugo offered his hand. 3 words he'd never said to anyone in his life. Gat grasped both of his hands and opened her quirk. The pull was stronger this time, deliberate, confident, a full breath instead of a sip. He felt it leave him through his left palm, a warm unraveling that traveled down his arm and out through his fingers into hers. The red-orange cloud bloomed beneath her glass-like skin, electric and alive, swirling up past her wrist in crackling tendrils that lit up the dark trail like a lantern. He watched the original quirk in her chest, the one from last night, the one she'd slept with, the one that still carried his resting heartbeat. 2 pieces of him now. One old, one new. Both safe inside her. He could feel the difference immediately. Not weakness, she hadn't taken enough for that, but absence. A quiet space where the constant hum of nitroglycerin usually buzzed beneath his skin. Like a room where the music had been turned down just enough to notice. His palms were still. No crackling. No sparks. Just skin. He looked at his left hand in hers. Then at her forearm where the new cloud drifted, bright and volatile, threading between the delicate structures visible through her increasingly transparent skin. Then at her chest, still cradling his quirk she was wearing like a jewel. Both thrumming his heart beat into her full of explosive light and fury. He was holding both her hands on a dark trail at dawn, his power living inside her body in two separate pieces, and he was quiet. Completely quiet. No anger. No deflection. No walls. His thumbs traced slow circles against her palms. His scarred right hand reached out and he put his thumb on the glowing marble in her chest. Instantly his mind was loud. He jumped back, unsure what happened. Gat smiled, sticking out her tongue. Your quirk is too close to the surface on top of my bone. You completed it. When I take a person's full quirk, I can hear their thoughts, dreams, feel their tension or pain, any brain activity. It makes it hard to take so many quirks at once, but if you touch it, my quirk reads it as the 1% in me and the 99% are joined as if I have your full quirk. I will hear your thoughts and you will hear your thoughts twice. Like an audio delay feedback loop, when it's in my hand it's deeper and less likely you can connect with it. Bakugo didn't return to hold her hand. He had a lot to think about. Gat watched his wheels turn, unsure what had tripped him up this time, but decided to give him the space. Gat puts her hand out for his earbud. He slowly pulls the case out from his pocket and places it into her hand. She stood there for a few seconds longer before she pushed off, jogging toward the trail. She looked over her shoulder to see Katsuki still standing there. Are you coming? Gat says to him. Still jogging. She wasn't going to slow down. He was faster than her. He would catch up if his brain recovered from the feedback loop. It really was 1000% or nothing with this boy. Gat smiled to herself, unsure what would happen. The music hadn't even clicked on yet. She took off like a shot and Katsuki stood there watching the orange light streak through her arms as she ran. The clouds moving, swirling, reacting to her acceleration like living things, the new breath of his quirk churning up her forearm in electric spirals that pulsed brighter with every footfall. His quirk looked alive inside her. He assumed it looked the same in him, but it was something majestic to see it in her. Then his competitive instinct kicked in and he launched after her, closing the gap in 14 brutal strides until he was beside her. Always beside her now, never ahead, never behind, and the trail opened up ahead of them. She was faster today. The orange energy wasn't weighing her down. If anything, it seemed to be fueling her, the nitroglycerin warmth spreading through her muscles like a secondary engine. Her skin caught the first light of dawn and scattered it through the glass-clear patches at her ears and fingertips, the orange clouds inside her refracting into prismatic bursts of color that painted the gravel beneath her feet. She was incandescent, literally glowing, running through the dark woods like a torch. Katsuki couldn't stop watching. His stride was automatic, muscle memory, carrying him while his eyes tracked the light moving inside her body. The old marble stayed in her chest, his resting heartbeat, steady and faithful. The new cloud in her forearm churned faster as her pace increased, mirroring her adrenaline, adapting to her. He pulled out her phone and pressed play. Watching her step up the pace as the music hit, Gat felt the beat. The music was fire, the day crisp, and he was beside her. Track 4 hit. The bass line dropped. She surged forward. Gat decided she was going to run until she collapsed and flew. Katsuki Bakugo smiled, wide, real, and feral, and chased her through the golden woods like his life depended on it. They hadn't said anything, but the run had been exhilarating. 15 miles and they were going to be late for class. Gat breathed. Exhausted, she slapped the earbud back in his hand and offered up her orange arm, saying nothing. He grasped her wrist and took the cloud of quirk back. Gat waved, still unable to talk, and started jogging to the dorms. Katsuki stood in the yard watching her jog away, his reclaimed quirk humming beneath his skin like it had been tuned to a different frequency. It felt different coming back, warmer, smoother, like a shirt that had been worn by someone else and now carried their scent. The nitroglycerin settled into his palms with an unfamiliar gentleness, and when he flexed his fingers experimentally, the first spark that crackled wasn't the usual sharp white-orange. It was softer. Just for a second. He stared at his hand. Then he noticed she'd kept the marble in her chest. The original one. The overnight one. Pulsing with his resting heartbeat, calm and warm and completely unreclaimed. She hadn't offered it. He hadn't taken it. And she'd walked away with it like it belonged to her now, because maybe it did. His chest did something and he wasn't sure he disliked it. He made it to class with 45 seconds to spare, hair still damp, uniform thrown on haphazardly, tie completely absent. He dropped into his seat and immediately found the back of her head 2 rows up. Her right hand was resting on her notebook, no quirk in her hand. It was still in her chest, he knew it even if he couldn't see it. His chest tightened. Everyone was going to say something. Everyone. Kirishima leaned over. Opened his mouth. Don't, Katsuki said quietly. Something in his tone made Kirishima close his mouth. Not out of fear. Out of recognition that whatever was happening was real and fragile and not something to joke about yet. Kirishima smiled wider and faced forward. Under his desk, Katsuki's rebuilt right hand flexed once. Feeling the absence not of his capabilities but of her touch. This morning she had not just touched him, but he had reached out and touched her. He chose to. He flexed his hand again. The day went as normal as expected for Gat. She hadn't seen much of Katsuki, but it felt like a good thing. Like how the run in the morning went. Mostly silent. Maybe he did feel like he had to fight for her attention any longer. No one had seen his quirk in her today. She had not thought about having to wear her uniform during school hours. It covered the skin of her chest to her neck. But that was about to change. After weightlifting and studying, Gat changed into PJs, soft breathes and a tank top before the afternoon became busy with the girls piling into the common area to watch a movie. They made cupcakes, cookies, charcuterie, popcorn and gossiped. Everyone had a good look at the explosion quirk in her chest. Don't poke it! Mina shrieked, yanking Hagikure's invisible finger away from Gat's glowing fingertip. What if it explodes? That's literally Bakugo's explosion quirk in there. It's not going to explode, Tsuyu said calmly, leaning in close with her wide eyes fixed on the red-orange marble drifting beneath the glass-clear skin. It's pretty, Ribbit. It pulses like a heartbeat. It is a heartbeat, Jiru said from the couch, earphone jack extended toward Gat's hand, listening with the focused intensity of a doctor reading an EKG. Her eyes widened slowly. Holy shit. That's actually his resting heart rate. I've heard it during training exercises. That is literally Bakugo's heartbeat living in chest. The room went quiet for exactly 1 second. Then Mina screamed into a throw pillow. That is the most romantic thing I have ever heard in my entire life, and it's happening to the most unromantic person on the planet. He doesn't deserve this narrative. She emerged from the pillow, mascara slightly smudged, pointing at Gat with a cookie. He's out there right now probably punching a wall and you're sitting here carrying his heart in your chest. It does smell like fruity caramel, Momo observed quietly, nose near Gat's shoulder, her composure barely intact. The nitroglycerin compound is actually quite pleasant. Achiko was clutching a cupcake with both hands, eyes enormous and glassy. You're literally glowing. Like literally. Jiru pulled her earphone jack back slowly. Looked at Gat with deadly seriousness. It just sped up. His heart rate just increased. She glanced at the ceiling toward the boy's floor. Whatever he's doing right now. He's thinking about something intense. Every eye in the room turned to Gat. Guys, there is 87% he has said about something or someone and fighting with 2 to 12 people at the same time. You all know that dash. The girls hearing noise behind them, turned their attention to the stairs. The boys' dorms were unloading into the common area. Mina stood up on the couch and yelled, "What do you guys want?" "We claimed the TV first." Kirishima appeared first, hands raised in surrender, that unbreakable grin plastered across his face. "Easy, easy. We're not here for the TV." Kaminari smelled cookies and we couldn't hold him back. Kaminari shoved past him, already reaching for the charcuterie board. "Is that brie?" "That's brie." Who made that prosciutto? Zero slid in behind them with the effortless calm of someone who lived for chaos. His eyes found Gat's chest immediately and his grin sharpened. Nice night light. Very aesthetic. Orange. Zero, I will into you, Mina hissed. Then the stairwell went quiet. Heavy boots. Slow, deliberate steps. The kind of footsteps that made rooms recalibrate. Katsuki appeared at the bottom of the stairs in sweatpants and a black t-shirt, hair still wild from whatever he'd been doing upstairs. He looked like he'd been dragged here against his will, which, based on the red marks on his arm where Kirishima had clearly physically hauled him, was probably accurate. His eyes swept the room with practiced hostility. The girls. The snacks. The movie paused on screen. Then his gaze landed on Gat on the jewel in her chest, his quirk glowing in her body surrounded by every girl in Class 1A who had clearly been studying it like a museum exhibit. His jaw tightened. His ears went red. A single spark popped from his palm. Gat turned away from him and leaned into the ladies. I'm gonna kidnap him and bring him to movie night. Mina's eyes went wide as dinner plates. She grabbed Gat's arm with both hands and whispered back with the urgency of a military strategist. If you get Katsuki Bakugo to sit down and watch a movie with us, I will owe you a debt that transcends this lifetime. No. Before he takes a cookie and bolts. Momo pressed a small plate of snickerdoodles into Gat's free hand with the solemnity of a general handing over ammunition. Godspeed. Tsuyu blinked. Use the cookies as bait, ribbit. Achiko was already on her own mission. Her cheeks flushed, Izuku standing behind the couch talking to her. Across the common room, Katsuki was standing at the edge of the snack table with the rigid posture of a wild animal that had wandered into civilization and was calculating its escape route. Kirishima had strategically positioned himself between Katsuki and the stairwell, blocking the retreat path with the casual subtlety of a concrete wall. Kaminari was stuffing his face and providing conversational cover. Zero was pretending to look at his phone while actually filming. Katsuki was eating a cookie against his will beside Shoto. He bit into it. His expression flickered with something dangerously close to approval before resetting to factory scowl. Then he felt it. His quirk pulsed in her was close to him. He hadn't noticed before. Was he able to feel where his quirk was in proximity to him? Like a GPS for Gat. His eyes snapped to her across the room, instant, magnetic, unavoidable, and found her already walking toward him with a plate of cookies and that devastating smirk. His jaw stopped mid-chew. She skipped the last few steps and put the cookie plate on the counter. She whispered to him, only him and Jiro could hear. The boys SCK, come watch the movie. I wouldn't love you to hold me for a while, boss. Bakugo choked on the snickerdoodle. Actually choked. A genuine, airway-compromised, cookie crumb in the windpipe choke that sent him into a coughing fit so violent that Kirishima instinctively activated his hardening and beat his friend in the back. But nobody else heard what she'd said. Just him. And Jiro across the room had gone completely rigid on the couch, both earphone jacks retracted tight against her head, eyes fixed on the ceiling with the 1,000-yard stare of a woman who had heard too much and could never unhear it. Momo glanced at her with concern. Jiro shook her head once, don't ask, and shoved an entire cookie into her mouth. Katsuki recovered. Barely. His eyes were watering from the coughing, which he would die before admitting, and his face had achieved a shade of red that medical science had not yet classified. He stared at her, mouth slightly open, cookie crumbs on his lower lip. I wouldn't love you to hold me for a while, boss. His brain replayed it 4 times. 6. Dissecting every word. She'd said love. In a sentence that was technically a negative construction, but the word was there, out loud, in the air, aimed at him from 6 inches away while his heartbeat glowed in her chest. He twisted his pinky in with his, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Move over. He growled at no one in particular, stalking toward the couch. And if anyone talks during the movie, I'll kill them. He sat down. Left side of the couch. The side next to her spot. And waited. Gat skipped back over to the ladies. They circled up in front of the TV. He had sat on the couch with them. The kidnapping plan had worked. The girls formed a tight huddle on the floor in front of the TV with the precision of a special ops unit debriefing after a successful mission. Mina was vibrating so intensely she was practically liquefying the carpet beneath her. She grabbed Achiko and Tsuyu by the arms and mouthed with exaggerated lip movements, "He's down. He's on the couch. This is not a drill." Achiko watched behind the girls grimacing as Izuku started talking to Bakugo. Everyone started turning their attention to the couch, slowly watching their plan die. Mina biting her nail, she hissed, "Damn it, they are gonna fight." "Momo, maybe not, let's watch for a second." "You can go die." "Deku." Bakugo grasped the green boy's shirt, "You did not lift 300. Zero has proof, it's already on socials." Izuku's smile radiated as he laid his knee into the back of the couch preparing to defend himself. "Damn it, I am not letting your terrible lifting form get ahead of me." Bakugo's hand flickered and smoked. "Achiko. Deploy, go smooth over Izuku. Get in there." Mina pushes her friend toward the fight. Achiko's voice was sweet and bright as if she had no idea. Deku was about to get a black eye. "Izuku, did you see I made snickerdoodles?" Her hands on the green boy pulled him toward the kitchen. Deku shoving Bakugo's hand at his shirt collar off with sparks from All for One. Tsuyu leaned into the huddle with her usual calm. Achiko is victorious. Momo was arranging throw blankets with suspicious intentionality, draping one over the left side of the couch, his side, their side, like she was staging a romance novel cover. "I've placed a blanket within reach. It's the soft one. Cashmere. If physical proximity occurs, comfort will not be an issue." Hagakure's invisible form bounced somewhere nearby. "Should we pick a scary movie? So she has an excuse to." "Genius." Mina started to flip through the options. "Absolute genius." "Or something with jump scares." "Cue up?" Jairu was still on the couch, still shell-shocked, staring into the middle distance. She turned her head slowly toward the huddle. "You guys don't understand." She whispered. What she said to him. "I heard it. I can never unknow what I know. Just." She swallowed. "Pick the scariest movie we own." She looked at Gat. "Go sit next to that boy before he explodes my couch." The girls break the circle, like a volleyball team with a strategic plan of action to follow. Gat skips to Katsuki. She half sat on the couch, half on his thigh, guiding his hand around her shoulder and lacing her fingers with his. He relaxed into the couch, his boot up on the ottoman next to her bare feet. Izuku and Achiko snuggled into one of Momo's blankets at the opposite end of the couch. Bakugo glared. Izuku smiled back, and she was sure that Katsuki flipped him off even though she didn't see it. The room held its collective breath. Mina had positioned herself on the floor directly in front of them, ostensibly watching the movie but actually watching the couch with the focus of a nature documentary filmmaker capturing a rare species in its habitat. She bit into a cookie to keep herself from screaming. The lights turned off and the other guys found places to park themselves between the girls. Katsuki sat rigid for exactly 12 seconds. Before something in him was released. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just a slow, incremental surrender, like ice melting in stages. His shoulder dropped first. Then his jaw unclenched. Then his arm, the one she'd guided around her shoulder, settled with deliberate weight against her back. His fingers curled around her upper arm, not pulling, not squeezing, just there. Holding. His thumb found the edge of her sleeve and traced the fabric line absently. He probably didn't know he was doing it. On screen, the horror movie opened with an establishing shot of a dark house. Katsuki's eyes were fixed on the TV, but he wasn't seeing it. Every nerve in his body was cataloging the press of her weight against his thigh, the warmth of her bare feet next to his boot on the ottoman, the way her fingers laced through his felt like the most natural thing that had ever happened to him. His heartbeat was slowing down. Not from disinterest. From comfort. From the specific, terrifying peace of a person who had never been held, discovering that it was the only thing he'd ever wanted. He said nothing. Just breathe. Gat took a bowl of popcorn Momo brought. Stealing the blanket from the back of the couch, curling into his side, her knees laying across his. The movie was actually good. Her attention on the story, jump scares made her jump, her face turning into his chest before turning back to sit against him. The first jump scare hit 20 minutes in, a standard fake-out, door slamming, orchestral sting, and she flinched into his chest hard enough that popcorn scattered across the cashmere blanket. Her face pressed against the black cotton of his t-shirt and he went absolutely still, every muscle frozen, his breath catching like someone had reached into his ribcage and squeezed. She smelled like her shampoo. That clean, light scent that had been haunting him for days. It was right there, her hair against his jaw, her forehead against his collarbone, and his arm tightened around her shoulder on pure instinct, pulling her closer before his brain could veto the action. She turned back to the screen, settled against him again, like it was nothing. Like burying her face in Katsuki Bakugo's chest was a casual thing people did. His heart was hammering so hard the marble in her chest was practically strobing. The second jump scare was worse. Genuine. A face in a mirror that wasn't there before, and the whole room screamed. Mina threw her cookie. Kaminari grabbed Siro's arm. Achiko levitated 3 inches off the floor involuntarily. Gat turned into him again. Harder this time. Her hand flattened against his chest and his arm wrapped around her completely. Both arms now, the popcorn forgotten, everything forgotten except the weight of her against him and the way she fit into the hollow of his body like she'd been engineered for it. He didn't let go when the scare passed. His chin settled on top of her head. Barely. Just enough that his jaw rested against her hair. His eyes stayed on the screen, expression carefully blank, but beneath the blanket his damaged right hand found hers and held it against his sternum. Over his heartbeat. The real one. His chest rose and fell beneath her cheek in a rhythm that had become the only thing in the world. Slow. Steady. The constant low hum of nitroglycerin beneath his skin vibrated faintly against her ear, not the explosive crackle she heard on the trail, but something quieter, deeper, like an engine idling. The sweet scent was everywhere, warm and sweet, rising from the heat of his body through the cotton of his shirt. His chin pressed a fraction deeper into her hair. His jaw shifted slightly, not adjusting, not uncomfortable, just nuzzling. A movement so small and so unconscious that if she hadn't been pressed against him she would have missed it entirely. Katsuki Bakugo was nuzzling her hair in a room full of people and he either didn't know or didn't care. His damaged right hand was still holding hers against his sternum. She could feel both heartbeats now, the real one beneath his ribs and the stolen one in her fingertip, and they were syncing. Slowly, beat by beat, the marble adjusted its rhythm until the 2 pulses became indistinguishable. One heartbeat shared between 2 bodies. Jairu had shifted to the far end of the couch. As far as physically possible. She had both earphone jacks stuffed into actual earbuds playing music at full volume, eyes determinately fixed on the screen, jaw clenched with the stoic endurance of someone trying very hard not to hear 2 heartbeats flirting with each other on the couch. Mina glanced back from the floor. Saw them. Her eyes filled with tears. She turned around and said nothing. The movie ended. Credits was asleep. Gat stood up quickly and moved to sit with Mina. Katsuki fell asleep in weird places often. But the lights turning on with her clasped to his side would be harder to get over. Gat got up with Mina, starting to clean up. When she whipped out her phone showing a picture of Katsuki and Gat. Gat squeaked, taking the phone out of Mina's hand, texting it to herself before handing her phone back. Gat couldn't stop smiling so much so her cheeks hurt. Mina snatched her phone back with a grin so wide it threatened to split her face in half. I took 12. She whispered, holding up fingers for emphasis. Different angles. The one where his chin is on your head? Cinematic. The one where you're holding hands under the blanket? I almost died taking that one. My hands were shaking so bad. Mina, shut up, Gat hissed, glancing back at the couch. Katsuki was still asleep. Actually, genuinely asleep, slumped into the corner of the couch with his head tilted back, lips slightly parted, one arm still extended across the cushion where she'd been. The blanket had pooled around his waist. Without the permanent scowl, without the tension, without the walls, he looked peaceful. The hard lines of his jaw softened in sleep, and the faint rise and fall of his chest was slow and even. A tiny crackle of nitroglycerin popped from his open palm, dreaming sparks, harmless and warm. Kirishima appeared silently beside them, stacking plates with uncharacteristic stealth. He looked at Katsuki on the couch, then at Gat, and his expression was something she hadn't expected. Not teasing. Not amused. Grateful. He doesn't sleep, Kirishima said quietly, keeping his voice below the clatter of cleanup. Like ever. Not well. Not since. All for one. That war was a year ago and he is still reliving it. He trailed off, glancing at the scarred right hand hanging off the couch. I'm next door. I hear him up at 3-4 a.m. Pacing. He looked at her. He slept. He picked up the plates and walked to the kitchen without another word. Gat followed the girls back to the girl dorms. She was going to bed. Tomorrow was Saturday, and she was unsure if he would run on the weekend. But she planned to be up on the path at 5:30 just in case. She set the alarm. Gat crashed into her pillow face first and laid there grinning into the fabric like an idiot. The marble pulsed against the fitted sheet, slow, dreaming, still synced to whatever peaceful place his unconscious mind had found on that couch. She wondered if he'd woken up yet. If he'd noticed she was gone. If he'd be angry about it or quietly relieved that she'd spared him the vulnerability of waking up tangled in someone in front of witnesses. Her phone buzzed. Gat fumbled for it, heart-lurching, and found Mina had already created a group chat titled Operation Explosion Heart with every girl in one. 12 photos flooded the chat in rapid succession, each one more devastating than the last. Katsuki's chin in her hair. Their hands under the blanket. His sleeping face. The orange marble glowing between their interlocked fingers like a tiny star. Momo sent a single message. The cashmere blanket worked. Achiko sent 17 heart emojis. Tsuyu. He's going to be on that trail tomorrow, ribbit. Guaranteed. Jairu sent nothing for a long time. Then, his heartbeat changed when she left the couch. Even asleep. Inu. Gat locked her phone. Pressed her fingertip against his quirk in her chest. His heartbeat thumped against Gat's sternum, slow, trusting, borrowed. She tried to lay down and sleep, but the excitement of this new relationship made her eyes want to be open. Gat flipped on her phone one more time and looked at the photos. The one where he was asleep and she was curled into him, and neither of them looked like people carrying the weight of quirks and expectations and futures too big for 17-year-old shoulders. 5. Gat continued to stretch. 5:35. Maybe he was late. She got out of the gravel and stretched her calves once more. She took the earbuds out of her pocket, glad she brought them. Gat shoved one in both ears and started down the path. She had been running for a half a mile when she felt him fall in step. She took out her earbuds. He didn't look different, his face was not giving off any clues. He ran beside her in silence for a full quarter mile. No earbud offering. No insult about her pace. No commentary on her form. Just the steady crunch of gravel and the synchronized rhythm of their breathing, side by side, the way it had been every morning, except today the air between them carried weight. His jaw was set. Not angry set. Processing set. The kind of tightness that meant he was building toward something, assembling words in his head with the same precision he used to calculate explosion trajectories. His eyes stayed fixed on the trail ahead, but his hands weren't sparking. Weren't crackling. Quiet palms. That was unusual. Another quarter mile. Then, without breaking stride, without looking at her, his voice came out low and rough and stripped of every sharp edge she'd come to expect. I woke up and you were gone. 7 words. Simple. No accusation. No anger. But underneath them was something vast and unguarded. The disorientation of a boy who had fallen asleep holding someone for the first time in his life and woken up alone on a couch in a dark common room with a cashmere blanket and the ghost of her cold on his chest. His stride didn't falter. His breathing stayed even. But his left hand, the one closest to her, the one that had held hers under the blanket, the one that had cradled her against his sternum, hung open at his side. Not reaching. Waiting. Was that 5 minutes ago? She smirked. Your hair says it was 5 minutes ago. His sound, it meant a 1,000 things. But right now it seemed to communicate he wasn't expecting her sass, You can keep your nose out of my business, glass girl. Gat smiled and raised her voice. You were the one that started this conversation, Katsuki. Excuse my audacity for commenting. She laughed and picked up the pace. But I'm gonna take that as a yes. You are late because you slept all night on the couch and didn't set an alarm. He had no difficulty matching her speed but did struggle to answer her. Because she was right and she already knew it. What's GAT short for, he asked, changing the subject. How do you know it's short for anything? She breathed as they turned the bend. GatGrace? GatGrace. It means one that keeps going. His feet slowed down to a standstill. What do you want me to call you? Gat searched his face. Gat is fine, GatGrace is fine. I'm just happy you haven't called me an extra or a brat in a few days. The silence stretched. I'm sorry I left you asleep. I was hoping that not making a big deal of it meant less classmates would notice. Gat took out her phone and showed him the downloaded pictures from Mina. Not the group chat. But we were hot together. Gat stepped closer, wanting to touch him again. Katsuki looked at the phone. His face went through a complete emotional renovation in approximately 3 seconds. First, the photo of his chin in her hair, the blanket draped over them, the orange glow between their fingers. His eyes widened. His lips parted. Something cracked open behind his expression that looked like wonder. Then, the realization that Mina had taken these. That photos existed. That evidence of Katsuki Bakugo soft, sleeping, and holding someone was out there in the digital world, vulnerable, copyable, sendable. I'm going to murder Raccoon Eyes. Katsuki. She stepped closer. Close enough that the morning air stopped existing between them. Close enough that he could see the marble still pulsing in her chest, faithful, warm his, and the way her eyes were looking at him like he was something worth keeping. I like them, I'm glad she took them. His threat died in his throat. He looked at the photos again. Really looked. At himself asleep with his guard completely dismantled. At her curled into him like she belonged there. At the way his arm wrapped around her, unconscious, even dreaming, like his body had made a decision his waking mind was still fighting. "That we look," he started, and his voice snagged. He cleared his throat. Tried again, prefect. Happy. Hot. Filled. His ears were crimson. His hand, the one that had been waiting at his side, lifted slowly and found her waist. Just resting there. Tentative. His fingers pressed into the fabric of her running shirt like he was testing whether she was real. Don't show anyone else, he said quietly. Not a demand. A request. Those are ours. He couldn't say it, but his hand tightened on her waist. Gat took her phone back and sent all the photos to him, his phone buzzing as he received them. She stuffed the phone in the pocket of her leggings and leaned close, rubbing her nose up his neck, trying to get him to bend towards her for a kiss. His brain shut down. Completely. Catastrophically. Every synapse, every neural pathway, every tactical calculation and strategic framework he'd ever built, gone. Wiped clean by the feeling of her nose tracing up the side of his neck, warm breath ghosting across his skin, the deliberate slow drag of it that left a trail of fire from his neck to his jaw. His hand on her waist turned to stone. His breathing stopped. A full-body shudder ran through him, visible, undeniable, and a chain of tiny explosions crackled across his free palm like a string of firecrackers, the scent blooming thick and sweet in the cold morning air. She was guiding him down, pulling him toward her without pulling. And his body was obeying, his neck bending, his head tilting, his forehead dipping toward hers with the slow inevitability of gravity, while his brain screamed from somewhere far away that this was happening. This was actually happening, on a trail at 5:45 in the morning with dew on the ground and birds in the trees and his heartbeat glowing in her chest. His nose brushed hers. He stopped. Right there. Millimeters away. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his skin, could see the individual flecks of dark crimson in his wide, terrified, wanting eyes. His breath came in shallow, ragged pulls against her lips. His hands slid from her waist to the small of her back, pressing her closer, closing the last inch of space between their bodies. I've never. The words were barely air. Broken. Honest. His lips ghosted against hers as he spoke, not quite touching, trembling. He had never done this before. I don't know how to. His eyes searched hers. Desperate. Brave. How does one confess they don't know how to kiss? Show me. Gat lifted on my tiptoes and pushed my lips into his. He had passion for his quirk and for hero work. Gat didn't doubt he would figure out how to kiss all on his own if he just had someone else's lips to use. She pressed her lips against his and the world detonated. Not his quirk, though that went off too, in quiet small snaps that produced plumes of sweet smoke spiraling into the dawn sky. His hand on her back spasmed, fingers splaying wide, pulling her against him so hard her feet nearly left the ground. A sound came out of him, low, broken, desperate, muffled against her mouth. His mouth moved against hers, clumsy at first, too hard, too much pressure, all the ferocity he brought to everything channeled into the press of his lips. But he was Katsuki Bakugo. He learned fast. Adapted faster. Within seconds he was reading her, the way she tilted, the way she breathed, the way her fingers curled into the front of his compression shirt, and adjusting with the same terrifying precision he used in combat. The pressure softened. His lips found the rhythm. His hands slid up her spine and cradled the back of her neck, thumb against her jaw, tilting her head to deepen the angle. He kissed like he fought, intense, relentless, completely committed, holding nothing back. The quirk in her became bright. The red-orange quirk let off detonations of small blazes so bright it cast their shadows across the trail, his heartbeat hammering through the stolen quirk at a rate that should have been medically concerning. His other hand found her waist, both arms wrapped around her now, lifting her slightly onto her toes as he bent into her. He pulled back gasping, forehead against hers, eyes still closed, trembling. He breathed, again. Gat smiled and giggled, sighing, "Yes, boss," pressed her lips into his again. The word boss hit differently against his lips. He growled, a low rumble from deep in his chest that vibrated against her mouth, and his arms tightened around her like he was trying to fuse them together through sheer force of will. The second kiss was nothing like the first. The first had been discovery. This was claiming. His hand on the back of her neck tilted her head further, fingers threading into her pulled-back hair, loosening it from its tie. His other arm was locked around her waist, lifting her fully onto her toes now, bearing her weight like it was nothing. He kissed her slower this time, deliberate, thorough, learning the shape of her mouth with the obsessive attention to detail he applied to everything he deemed worthy of mstring. And he was a fast learner. Devastatingly fast. His bottom lip caught hers. Released. His breath shuddered against her skin. The trail was empty. The dawn was breaking gold and pink through the canopy. Somewhere a bird was singing and neither of them heard it. The marble jewel blazed between them like a tiny sun, his heart beat so fast the orange light was practically solid, and his palms kept sparking against her back, tiny harmless pops of nitroglycerin that left warm spots through her shirt like fingerprints made of light. His forehead dropped against hers. His eyes squeezed shut. His arms wrapped around her so tight his shoulders shook, and the sound that came out of him was something between a breath and a sob that he would deny until the heat death of the universe. His hand on the back of her neck trembled. His fingers curled into her hair and held on like she was the only solid thing in a world that had just tilted sideways. Her hand was on his sternum. His real heartbeat under her palm. The stolen heartbeat in her chest. Both hammering. Both hers. The morning light caught the quirk in her chest and threw orange fractals across his face, his closed eyes, his parted lips. His quirk was crackling across his entire body now, tiny sparks dancing along his arms and shoulders like bioluminescence, harmless, involuntary, appealing. The sweet scent was so thick it was almost tangible, wrapping around them both like a cocoon. He turned his face into her palm on his chest, lips against her wrist, breathing her in. Something shifted in his expression. The vulnerability didn't disappear, didn't get shoved behind walls and locked away like it always had before. It just settled. Found a place to exist alongside the fire and the pride and the ferocity that made him who he was. Like she'd carved out a space where softness was allowed to stay inside his armor beside him. He pulled back, looked at her. Really looked, the loosened blue hair falling around her face where his fingers had pulled it free, her eyes light blue and pink in the morning sunrise light, the flushed cheeks, the orange marble blazing in her sternum like a promise. His thumb traced her jaw one last time, slow, memorizing. Then that grin broke across his face. The real one. The feral, wild, all-teeth grin that he wore in the heat of battle, but warmer now. Brighter. Aimed at her like a spotlight. "Run with me," he said, and his voice was rough and wrecked and happy. He took a few steps down the trail. Waiting for her. Katsuki Bakugo wanted to run through the golden morning light with sparks trailing from his palms. He glanced back over his shoulder. Eyes bright. Hand for her to catch beside him. The sweat poured off her face. She looked at her watch. Class happening in less than 30 minutes. This run was a full 5 minutes faster than yesterday. But her heart rate was much higher. His arm already catching her and taking his quirk back. His hand open, she slapped his earbud back to him. His fingers grasping hers right before they slipped free, pulling her close, his lips on hers. A quick kiss. No words. None were needed. She turned and ran back to school. Katsuki stood on the trail like a man who had been struck by lightning and enjoyed it. His lips were still warm. His hand was still extended in the empty air where her fingers had slipped free. The reclaimed quirk hummed beneath his skin. Different again, changed again, carrying traces of her heartbeat woven into the nitroglycerin like threads of gold in dark fabric. His earbud sat in his palm next to the ghost of her touch. His brain catalogued it, filed it, burned it into permanent storage in a folder he would never admit existed, right next to the sound of his name in her mouth and the feeling of her lips against his and the image of orange light blazing in glass-like fingertips. He stood there for 10 seconds. 15. 20. Then he looked down at his phone. Unchecked messages from the photos she'd sent earlier that he'd never actually opened. He thumbed it unlocked. 12 images loaded. Him asleep. Her curled into him. The blanket. The glow. The two of them looked like something worth protecting. He stared at them for a long time. Then he opened a new contact. Typed her name. Not a nickname. Not an insult. Her actual name. Saved it. Opened the message thread and saved the pictures to his phone. He shoved the phone in his pocket and sprinted toward the dorms, grinning like a maniac, palms crackling, 17 years old and terrified and brave and completely, catastrophically, irreversibly gone. School started differently than normal. Today was the teacher's challenge. Aizawa and Present Mike walked them out to the training arena. Pro heroes would pretend to be villains. The students would be put into teams and either need to take down the hero with cuffs or escape. The training arena sprawled out before them like a small city, buildings, alleyways, elevated platforms, rubble zones, all designed to simulate real urban combat scenarios. The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete, and the air carried that particular tension that always preceded practical exams. Aizawa stood at the entrance, capture weapon draped around his neck, eyes half-lidded with his usual exhausted disinterest. Present Mike flanked him, grinning with an energy that was offensive for 9 a.m. "Listen up," Aizawa said, his voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. "Today's exercise is simple. Pro heroes will act as villains in the arena. You'll be assigned teams of 2. Your objective is binary: restrain the villain with the provided capture cuffs or successfully extract your team from the designated escape zone. Failure to accomplish either within the 30-minute time limit is a loss." He paused, scanning the class with those dry, calculating eyes. The pro heroes will not be holding back. Consider this a realistic threat assessment. Present Mike leaned into his megaphone with barely contained glee. "And the team assignments are..." Aizawa shoved him aside and read from his clipboard in a tired, monotone voice. "Team 1. Bakugo and Prism." Katsuki's head snapped up. Across the group, 22 sets of eyes swiveled between the two of them with varying degrees of shock, delight, and barely concealed hysteria. Mina grabbed Kirishima's arm so hard he had to harden it. Katsuki's jaw set. His eyes found hers across the crowd. Not soft. Not vulnerable. The warrior. Sure. Focused. Ready. "Who's the target?" Katsuki shouted, his usual bark. Aizawa did not look back to the clipboard. He knew he had been on the council that decided these matches. Endeavor. The name landed like a bomb. The class went silent. Kaminari's mouth fell open. Kirishima's hardening activated involuntarily. Even Todoroki, stoic, unflappable Todoroki, turned his head sharply, heterochromatic eyes narrowing with something complicated and unreadable. Aizawa didn't blink. Present Mike leaned in, unusual. Subdued. The number one hero. The man draped in hellfire. The walking inferno who had surpassed all Might's vacancy not through charm or symbol but through sheer, relentless, burning force. Katsuki's eyes went sharp. Not afraid, Katsuki Bakugo did not do afraid, but calculating. Running numbers. Assessing variables. His internship at the Endeavor Agency meant he knew the man's patterns, his tells, his weaknesses. Few as they were. He crossed the distance to her in 4 strides, grabbing her arm and pulling her away from the group with zero regard for subtlety. Mina nearly fainted. Listen, he said low, fast, and tactical. His red eyes burned into hers with an intensity that had nothing to do with the trail or the kiss or the quirk in her chest. This was combat Katsuki. Endeavor runs hot. Literally. His quirk is fire-based, and his combat radius is massive. Getting close enough to cuff him is almost impossible without a plan. His grip tightened on her arm. Can you take his quirk? She smiled wickedly. Yes, of course. But I could also take several quirks with me. Who in our class could I borrow a quirk from to make this easier? Katsuki's eyes widened. They narrowed, then ignited with that feral, battle-hungry grin that made villains reconsider their life choices. You can carry multiple, he breathed, his tactical brain shifting into overdrive. She could see it happening behind his eyes. The rapid-fire calculations, the matchup analysis, the strategic web expanding outward like a war map being drawn in real time. His hand was still on her arm, but his grip had changed from protective to collaborative. Partners. Equals. He started pacing, 3 steps left, 3 steps right, fingers sparking unconsciously. Endeavor's heavy and fast. He's powerful, but he's a tank, hits hard, moves in straight lines, relies on overwhelming force. His flash-fire fist has a wind-up. If you can close the gap before he fires. He stopped. Turned to her. Todoroki's ice. His voice was sharp, certain. Half and half's ice sighed. You take that and you have a direct counter to Endeavor's flames. He's fought his own son's ice before, but he won't expect it from you. He held up 2 fingers. Second, Kirishima. Red riots hardening. Endeavor lands a hit on you before you can strip his quirk. You need to survive the impact. Hardening gives you armor. 3 fingers now. His grin was manic. And mine. He looked at her. Dead serious. You take mine. Explosion for mobility. You felt how the nitroglycerin works in your body. Use the concussive force to launch yourself. Close the distance fast. He grabbed both her shoulders. 3 quirks. Ice, armor, explosion. You become the weapon. I become the distraction. Gat rubbed his quirk in her chest, thinking. I understand how to use Kirishima's and Shoto's. And I don't want yours. It takes work to learn your quirk that I haven't done, besides you will be at my side. It may be a stretch, but I want a Choco's gravity quirk. Bakugo's grin faltered for half a second, not at the rejection of his quirk, but at the tactical implications of what she just proposed. His brain ran the scenario at lightning speed, and she watched the exact moment it clicked. Zero gravity, he whispered. His eyes went wide. Then savage. You strip Endeavor's fire quirk and hit him with 0 gravity simultaneously. No flames. No footing. He's a 250-pound slab of muscle floating in the air with no quirk and no way to maneuver. He slammed his fist into his palm, a concussive pop echoing across the staging area. And I blast him into the cuffs while he's helpless. His laugh was sharp and vicious and delighted. That's the most underhanded, ruthless, that's perfect. And it could be fast. He was already moving, stalking back toward the group with purpose. Then he stopped, turned back to her. Something flickered beneath the battle focus, quick, warm, private. You said at my side. Not a question. A confirmation. He held her gaze for one burning second. Don't fall behind. Then he was marching toward the class, barking orders with the authority of a general who had never once considered that people might not obey him. Half and half. Shitty hair. Round face. Get over here. Now. Todoroki looked mildly inconvenienced. Kirishima perked up immediately. Achiko clutched her hands together nervously. Do what Prism asks. Gat touched each, taking the most from Kirishima, wanting to make sure she could defend herself. She put her head close to Achiko, asking quick how to work her quirk before Katsuki grabbed her elbow and pulled her toward the starting line, the countdown already running. 3 quirks hummed inside her like a symphony tuning up. Kirishima's hardening sat heavy in her ribs, dense, solid, a deep red glow that settled beneath her collarbone like armor waiting to be called. Todoroki's ice coiled through her left arm in crystalline blue threads. Cold and precise, frost forming at her fingertips and evaporating in the morning heat. Achiko's zero gravity floated in her right hand, pink and weightless, tingling at her fingertip pads the way Achiko had described. All 5 fingers. Press them together on the target. Release by pressing your own fingertips together and saying release. Simple. Devastating. The marble jewel, Katsuki's marble, the overnight one, the original, still pulsed in her chest beneath all of it. She hadn't given that back. He hadn't asked. Katsuki dragged her to the starting line, his hand on her elbow burning hot through her sleeve. The arena stretched before them, a labyrinth of concrete buildings and narrow streets designed to simulate downtown combat. Somewhere inside, Endeavor was waiting. The air already shimmered with heat distortion rising from the arena center. 30 seconds, Present Mick's voice boomed across the speakers. Katsuki released her elbow, dropped into a ready stance beside her. Palms crackling, eyes looked forward. Every trace of the boy from the trail was gone, replaced by something sharper, harder, a weapon forged in ambition and fury and the absolute refusal to lose. Stay close until we spot him, he said, voice low and tactical. I engage first. Draw his fire. You flank left and get close enough to touch. The second you strip his quirk, hit him with zero gravity. I'll handle the rest. He glanced at her. 1 second. Brief and blazing. Don't die. The buzzer sounded. Katsuki started to run. It was an easy pace. Gat kept in rhythm, his pinking catching her on each down stroke. He was listening. He had fighting experience that Gatic didn't. She followed him. He would get her to Endeavor, and then she would follow his plan to the letter. This would be over instantly. They moved through the arena like a single organism. Katsuki led them through the narrow alleyways, hugging the shadows of the concrete buildings, his footsteps deliberately quiet, a restraint that went against every fiber of his being, but proved how seriously he was taking this. His pacing was controlled, tactical, nothing like the explosive charges he usually led with. He was preserving energy, reading the environment, listening. His pinky caught hers on every downstroke. Steady, rhythmic, a silent communication channel running beneath the mission. I'm here, you're here, we're together, we're fine. He threw up a fist. So, she halted instantly. No questions. No hesitation. Complete trust. Katsuki pressed his back against the concrete wall and tilted his head, nostrils flaring. The air had changed. Warmer. Drier. The faint shimmer of heat distortion rippled at the end of the alley where it opened into a wide plaza. The concrete beneath their feet was hot, not sun-hot, quirk-hot. Radiant. Recent. He's close, Katsuki breathed, barely audible. His red eyes were razor-sharp, scanning the rooftops, the windows, the sight lines. 2 blocks. Maybe less. He's running his flames low to mask his position, but the thermal footprint is sloppy. He wants us to come to him. He turned to her. Combat-focused. Precise. But his pinky found hers one more time and pressed. When I move, count to 10. Then flank left through that building. He jerked his chin toward a shattered storefront. I'll make enough noise for both of us. His grin was sharp enough to cut glass. You won't see me. But he won't see you either. Gat nodded, butterflies of excitement settling into her stomach. Katsuki launched. No countdown. No warning. 1 second he was beside her, pinky against hers, and the next he was airborne, twin explosions from his palms rocketing him over the rooftops in a blazing arc of smoke and light. His war cry split the arena like thunder, raw and savage and loud, designed to draw every eye and every flame toward himself and away from her. What? She pressed against the wall. The heat was intensifying. 3. An enormous column of fire erupted 3 blocks ahead, Endeavor responding to the challenge. The shockwave rattled windows. The temperature spiked so sharply that the air tasted like burning metal. 4. Katsuki's explosions answered, rapid, concussive, deafening. He was engaging, drawing fire, being the loudest, most obnoxious, most impossible to ignore target on the field. Being himself. 6. 7. She moved. Through the shattered storefront, glass crunching under her shoes, Kirishima's hardening prickling beneath her skin ready to deploy. Todoroki's ice hummed cold in her left arm. Achiko's gravity tingled in her right fingertips. 8. 9. She emerged from the building's far side into a parallel alley. Through the gap between structures, she could see them, Katsuki dodging pillars of hellfire with explosive lateral bursts, screaming obscenities, keeping Endeavor's massive frame turned away from her approach. The number 1 hero stood in the center of the plaza like a sun, flames wreathing his body, focused entirely on the screaming blonde projectile harassing him from every angle. Her left flank was wide open, 30 meters to Endeavor's exposed back. She ran. The training in the morning had made her faster. Ridiculously fast. Kirishima's quirk harding her skin in case Endeavor fired toward her. But his focus was on Katsuki on the ground bellow, firing off AP shots and insults. Endeavor was in the air above the street. Gat jumped to the fire escape. The noise Katsuki was making covering any noise Gat was making on her approach. On the last round of the fire escape, Gat tossed her hand out forming an ice bridge from the stairs to Endeavor. She stepped from the fire escape to the ice bridge without slowing. Breathing out all the air in her lungs, Gat touched Endeavor. Inhaling a brutal intake. Endeavor's entire quirk inside of her vessel power in one deep breath. The quirk displayed inside of Gat as furious flames. Endeavor starting to fall. Gat pushed her fingers together mimicking Achiko, Endeavor's fall turning into a soft ascension into the sky. Endeavor's eyes went wide. The flames died. All of them. Instantly. Like someone had flipped a SWH on the sun. The inferno wreathing his body, the hellfire that had defined him, that had made him the number 1 hero, that had burned so hot it warped the air itself, vanished. Gone. Stripped from his body in a single breath by a girl who had materialized out of nowhere on a bridge of stolen ice. And then the ground left him. Endeavor, 250 pounds of muscle and fury and pride, drifted upward like a balloon. His massive frame rotated slowly in the air, arms grasping at nothing, legs kicking uselessly against zero gravity. The expression on his face cycled through shock, disbelief, and something that looked almost like admiration before settling into the grim recognition of a man who understood he'd been outmaneuvered completely. What? His voice boomed across the plaza, stripped of its usual authority by the absurdity of his position. Floating. Quirkless. Helpless. Katsuki didn't miss a beat. He came screaming out of the sky like a comet, palms detonating in a controlled spiral that launched him directly at the floating hero. The capture cuffs were already in his hand. His trajectory was perfect, calculated midair with the terrifying precision of someone who treated physics like a suggestion. He slammed into Endeavor at full speed, the impact sending them both spinning in the zero-gravity field, and with one savage motion clicked the cuffs around the hero's wrists. The buzzer sounded. Match complete. Students win. Present Mick's voice cracked with disbelief. That was... Listeners, that was 93 seconds. 93. Katsuki settled into the ground hard under the cuffed, quirk-less, floating number 1 hero, breathing hard, grinning like a wolf. His eyes found hers below. She stuck her tongue out and jumped over to him. Endeavor floated between them like the world's most intimidating parade balloon. The number one hero hung suspended in zero gravity, cuffed and quirkless, watching the two teenagers below him exchange silent words and stuck out tongues with an expression that defied categorization. It wasn't anger, though his pride was clearly hemorrhaging. It wasn't disappointment. It was the look of a man who had spent decades climbing to the top through sheer force and was now watching two kids dismantle him in 93 seconds through teamwork so seamless it looked choreographed. "Release me," Endeavor said. His voice was calm, controlled. The kind of controlled that meant he was choosing not to be furious. "Oh, right." She pressed her fingertips together. "Release." Endeavor dropped like a stone. He landed in a crouch that cracked the concrete, one knee down, cuffed hands braced against the ground. He stood slowly, towering, massive. His eyes moved from Gat to Katsuki, who had landed beside her with a final explosion, still grinning. "Your quirk," Endeavor said, looking at Gat. "Give it back." She reached out for the number one hero's hand and exhaled. The hellfire poured out of her, furious, enormous, almost too much, flooding back into Endeavor's body like a river returning to its bed. His flames reignited instantly, wreathing his shoulders and jaw, and the plaza temperature spiked 30 degrees in a heartbeat. Endeavor rolled his shoulders, tested his fire. Satisfied, he looked at Katsuki. "You chose well," he said simply. Then he walked away. Katsuki's hand found hers. Squeezed once. "Demon, right, I did." Gat let go of Katsuki to return the quirks she had borrowed. Kirishima was first. He stood with his arms crossed, watching her approach with that broad, easy grin. When she reached out and pressed her hand against his forearm, the deep red glow drained from her chest and poured back into him, heavy, warm, solid. He shuddered slightly, flexed his fists, and his skin hardened and released in a quick test. "Feels like it went to the gym without me," he laughed, rotating his shoulders. Todoroki was next. He stood apart from the group, arms folded, watching her with quiet heterochromatic eyes. She touched his wrist and the crystalline blue threads unwound from her left arm, spiraling back into him like frost retreating from a window. His right side exhaled cold mist. He blinked once. "Interesting," he said. "Nothing else." Classic Todoroki. Achiko bounced on her toes nervously until Gat pressed their fingertips together and the pink, weightless tingle flowed home. Achiko gasped, then giggled, pressing her returned gravity pads against her own cheeks. 93 seconds, Gatic. "That's amazing. You did a great job." Emptied of everything borrowed, Gat settled into the bleachers between Mina and Jairu. The orange marble drifted lazily in her chest, the only thing left, the only thing that was hers, pulsing with his calm, resting heartbeat. Mina leaned over, eyes locked on the marble, then on Gat's face. "You're glowing and it's not just the quirk," Gatic blushed. They had done well. Adding to the growing idea they may be a good couple together. Katsuki's walked out of the staging area when Izuku appeared at the edge of the plaza, notebook out, pen moving at the frantic speed of a boy who had just witnessed something that required immediate tactical documentation. Katsuki saw the notebook first, then the muttering, then the green eyes darting between them, between Kaken, the fading ice bridge, and the spot in the sky where Endeavor had floated helplessly. "She is faster than our last challenge," Izuku said, pen still scratching. His eyes were bright with that particular analytical hunger that made him simultaneously impressive and insufferable. He looked up from the notebook and his gaze landed on Gatic in the stands. Something warm and complicated moved across his freckled face. "She seems fond of you, Kaken." The plaza went quiet. The other classmates standing in the bleachers now interested in how Bakugo answered. Katsuki's jaw tightened. The old Katsuki would have exploded, would have screamed, would have launched himself across the concrete and detonated something near Izuku's stupid freckled face for daring to comment on something so private. But the old Katsuki hadn't been kissed on a trail at dawn. His hand sparked once. His ears went red. His jaw worked through 3 aborted responses before he settled on one, delivered through clenched teeth at a volume meant only for them. "Yeah, she is fond of winning." Write that in your stupid notebook, Deku. And get the speed data right this time. She's faster than 93 seconds. I was slow on the cuffs.